I arrived home that evening expecting nothing out of the ordinary. The home was peaceful. Too quiet. There are no sounds from the television. No music is playing. Not even Emily's laptop keys clicked like they always did. Just silence. I walked into the living room, tossed my keys on the coffee table, and noticed her sitting on the couch. She brought her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms about herself. Her face was pallid, and her eyes were strangely blank. "What is wrong?" I questioned as I kicked off my shoes. She didn't respond. Just sat there, staring at nothing. My stomach wrenched slightly. Emily was never like this. She had a sharp tongue, and was never without an opinion. The type of woman who has an answer for everything. I felt strange seeing her like this. I moved closer. That was when I noticed the crumpled piece of paper in her hands. She grabbed it so fiercely that her knuckles became white. "Emily." My voice was sharper this time. "What the hell is going on?" She blinked, as if she saw me for the first time. Then, without saying anything, she extended the paper toward me. My heartbeat quickened as I took it from her. The first thing I saw was the letterhead of a medical facility. My eyes scanned downward, and suddenly I stopped breathing. Positive. It was an STD test result. The world around me transformed. The walls felt as if they were caving in. My hands clutched the paper so firmly that it crinkled. And for a long time, I just stood there, transfixed, my brain unable to make sense of what I was seeing. Emily. My wife. How? How in the hell did this happen? My voice seemed strangely calm, yet inside, a storm was brewing. She did not respond immediately. She gulped hard and ran a shaky hand through her hair. "I don't know," she stammered. A bolt of rage struck me. "You don't know?" My voice rose sharply, doubting. "Emily, are you genuinely going to sit there and tell me you have no idea how you contracted an STD? Her lips parted, but no words emerged. I detected a spark of panic in her eyes. She realized she had been caught and had no idea how to spin it. I stepped forward. She sank back into the couch. "Tell the truth now." She opened her mouth before closing it again. And that's when it struck me. Like a freight train. The wedding. She traveled to Chicago for a friend's wedding 2 weeks ago. A weekend getaway with only her and a handful of her college buddies. She had emailed me pictures, including selfies with the bride, champagne boomerangs, toasts, and fuzzy photos of a crowded dance floor. She had returned home weary, having slept for nearly a whole day, and had responded to any queries I had about the trip with vague, sloppy responses. And now this. I felt nauseous. "Chicago," I replied harshly. She flinched. I let out a sour, humorless laugh. "Is that it? That's where this occurred?" "No." She spoke out too hastily. Too desperate. I swear I did not shut up. My voice was as keen as a sword. She squeezed her mouth shut. I turned away and ran my palm down my face, attempting to stop my thoughts from tumbling. My wife. My wife. She'd done this. She had gone to the wedding and lied to my face. And now she was sitting here, pretending to have no idea what had transpired. And then, as if she had suddenly regained her footing, her countenance transformed, her shoulders squared, her lips pulled into a tight line, and she was no longer the scared, trembling woman I had walked in on. She was defensive. "I don't see why you're freaking out," she snapped. "This means nothing. The test could be incorrect. Or perhaps you gave it to me." I laughed at that. A frigid, piercing arc of doubt. "Are you out of your mind? I haven't touched anyone besides you. And years." She crossed her arms. "So, neither have I." I stared at her, expecting her to crack, waiting for her to admit it. But she just sat there, chin raised in defiance, as if she believed she could trick me into believing that some STD had magically arisen out of thin air. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Every part of me was screaming at me to overturn the coffee table, punch a hole through the goddamn wall, do something, and let out the sheer rage that was coursing through me. But I did not. Instead, I flung the paper on the floor. "I'm getting tested," I responded, my voice frigid. "And if I don't have it, you may stop lying to me." She didn't respond, simply glanced away, her jaw clenched. I turned and walked away. I needed answers. I drove directly to the clinic, my mind racing. The fury was seething just beneath the surface. But it was something worse. A sensation I did not intend to convey. Something harsh and horrible twisted deep into my chest. Betrayal. Emily lied to me. I knew it. I could see it in her face, the way she paused before handing me the test results. But what truly irritated me, what really made my anger boil, was how swiftly she tried to turn it on me. As if I had stepped out, as if I had wrecked our marriage. I clenched my teeth as I drove into the urgent care clinic's parking lot. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed quietly as I checked in. The nurse hardly acknowledged me, As she handed me the paperwork, I filled it out with hands that felt too solid, given the fury screaming inside me. The test was brief. A blood draw. The doctor asked a few embarrassing questions, and I was out of there. Results in a few days. I didn't need them to know the truth, however. Emily cheated on me. As I sat in the car, my breathing became heavy. I grasped the steering wheel. I should have been upset. Should have been ready to drive back home and demand the truth from her. But all I felt was chilly, like if my body had already processed the wrath and was now simply operating on empty. I needed more than simply a medical test. I needed indisputable evidence. Something she couldn't turn or manipulate. Because if there was one thing I knew about Emily, it was that she never admitted her mistakes unless she had no option. And if she could lie square to my face tonight, she was capable of much worse. I drove home carefully, taking the long way, hoping to clear my mind. When I pulled into the driveway, the lights inside were still turned on. She waited for me. I entered, closing the door behind me with deliberate slowness. Emily was still sitting on the couch, but she had her arms crossed and her legs tucked beneath her, observing me as if I were an intruder in my own home. "Well?" she asked. Her speech was clipped and defensive. "Were you tested?" I tossed my keys on the counter. "Yeah." She nodded, as if that demonstrated anything positive. I exhaled gently and stared at her. "Why don't you tell me the truth, Emily?" She rolled her eyes. "I already did. I'm not sure how this happened." I scoffed. "So, what? Do you expect me to think that a miraculous STD just came out of nowhere?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I had it before we met, and it was all crap." My voice sounded sharper than I intended. "We have been together for 7 years. Do you believe it just decided to show up?" Her lips pressed together. She knew I had her. Instead of acknowledging it, she did what she always does when she finds herself in a tight spot. She became nasty. "You know what? You're being real. Asterisk. Asterisk. Asterisk God R&D's currently paranoid." She snapped. "I've told you the truth. If you do not believe me, that is your problem." I gave a sluggish, humorless chuckle. "Want to know what I think?" She glared. "Not really." I ignored her. "I believe you went to that wedding and had some fun, and now you're trying to fake your way out of it." Her face wrenched away. Asterisk. Asterisk? Asterisk? Seriously? I moved closer. "You cheated on me." I did not say it. "I didn't do asterisk, asterisk, asterisk." "And you cheat on yourself," she yelled, leaping to her feet. Her hands were squeezed into fists at her sides, and her chest rose and fell quickly. She was lying. And I knew because Emily only shouted when she felt bad. I stared at her for a long time, letting the quiet between us grow. Then slowly and deliberately, I took out my phone. Her eyes darted to it, cautious. "What are you doing now?" "I am going to find out who it was." Her face turned pallid. "Gotcha." I unlocked my phone and accessed our phone bill account. Emily didn't know anything about technology. She probably believed that erasing texts or call logs from her phone made them disappear forever. But I had access to everything. The numbers, the timestamps, all of it. I browsed down, seeking for anything unique. And then there's one that has appeared repeatedly in the last 2 weeks. Late at night, occasionally several times in a row. I clicked on it and copied it to my contacts. Emily remained motionless, her gaze fixed on me. "Who is this?" I asked while holding up the screen. Her lips parted slightly. A spark of something passed across her face. Guilt. Panic. Hesitation. But suddenly, like flicking a switch, she forced her expression to be neutral. "I don't know," she lied. "You don't know?" I repeated that voice communication must be spam. I glanced at her before carefully, purposefully pressing the dial button. The phone began to ring, and somewhere inside the house, from another room, another phone began to ring with a muted vibration. A phone inside our home. My blood became chilly. I shifted my attention to the sound. Emily did as well. Her eyes expanded slightly. Then, before I could respond, she moved quickly. She darted past me, rushing down the corridor. And in that moment, I knew who had called her, and who she had been talking to late at night. They were here. I didn't realize. I've simply moved. Emily was almost halfway down the hall, her bare feet smacking against the hardwood as she dashed toward our bedroom. I dashed after her, adrenaline rushing through me, my heart pounding so hard that it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. She reached the door first, yanking it open with such force that it banged into the wall. I was close behind her, my pulse pounding in my ears, and as she dove toward the bed, I noticed it. Her nightstand drawer was partly open. A telephone. A second telephone. I grabbed her wrist before she could grasp it and yanked her backwards. She let out a yell, writhing in my grip, her other hand clawing at me, attempting to break free. But I wouldn't let go. Not this time. Whose phone is that? My voice boomed throughout the room. Emily thrashed in my grasp. Let me go. Who? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk is in my house. She kicked out at me, catching my shin. Pain erupted up my leg, but I didn't mind. I released off of her arm just long enough to grab the phone from the nightstand before she did. I had just curled my fingers around it when she tackled me. We landed hard on the floor, her nails cutting into my arm, her breath ragged and fierce in my ear. She was battling like an animal, desperate, and clutching at the phone. But I was stronger. I rolled, pinning her underneath me, and holding the gadget so tightly that my knuckles ached. Don't lie to me, I screamed, my face inches from hers for the first time. She remained quiet, her chest rising and falling fast beneath me. Her pupils were blown wide. There was something there. Fear, perhaps. Perhaps it was simply the knowledge that she had been caught. Who is it? I demanded in a low and deadly voice. She swallowed forcefully, her breath trembling. No one. I breathed sharply through my nose. Then, without breaking eye contact, I unlocked my phone. There's no password, idiot. The call log was right there, staring at me, with the most recent call, the one I had just made. At the top. No name, only a number. But it didn't matter because one name was immediately beneath it on the list of regular contacts. Nick. I froze. My entire body became frigid. Nick is our pal. Our married buddy Nick, who had attended the ceremony in Chicago. Nick and his wife Lauren were among Emily's closest pals. Nick had been to my place dozens of times. My grasp on the phone tightened, and my fingers dug into the side so hard that I thought it may crack in half. I slowly turned my head to gaze down at Emily. She paid close attention to me. Her lips form a thin, bloodless line. Waiting to see how I'd react. Nick? My voice came out quietly. Too quiet. Emily didn't respond. I pushed off her and climbed to my feet, my breathing shallow and irregular. The room felt smaller and hotter. The walls are closing in. Nick is my so-called pal. At 8. I clenched my teeth so hard that my vision tunneled as I stared down at the phone in my hand. I wanted to throw it, smash it, and drive my fist through the damned wall. Instead, I took a calm and measured breath. Then another. I turned and walked out of the bedroom without saying anything else. Emily climbed up behind me. Where are you going? I ignored her and moved down the hall. Hey, I am talking to you. I continued walking. Jason. I came to a standstill in the kitchen doorway, my back to her. Then I slowly turned around. Emily was standing in the hallway barefoot. Her hair tangled, her eyes blazing with something I couldn't identify. She wasn't sorry. She was not crying. She didn't even apologize. She was angry. As if I were the one who had done something wrong. As if I were the villain in her story. I let out a small giggle and shook my head. Wow. I mumbled beneath my breath. Do you honestly not give a shit? She crossed her arms. What would you like me to say, Jason? The first stared at her. Do you want me to cry? To beg? To behave like a sad wife pleading for pardon? She gave a sharp, bitter laugh. Not going to happen. I breathed gently and dragged a palm down my face. Unbelievable. She shrugged. It's not like you are a saint. I blinked. Then I laughed. What? You think I don't know how you look at other women? She accused, moving closer. You think I haven't noticed the way you flirt with waitresses and coworkers? God, Jason, you behave so asterisking perfect. But you are not. I looked at her in utter bewilderment. Are you really trying to excuse cheating on me by stating, I what? I smiled at a waitress. She shrugged again, her lips curling into what appeared to be a grin. I'm simply saying, maybe you should look in the mirror before behaving so arrogant. Something in my chest snapped. I took a slow and careful stride forward. Emily stood firm, chin tilted up in contempt. You cheated on me. I spoke in a steely tone, not just with anyone. With a pal. With a man whose wife trusts you. A guy who had been in our house, sat at our dining table, and smiled at me. I leaned down and lowered my voice to a whisper. You don't feel awful about it. For the first time, she took a brief glance aside. But that was sufficient. I drew back, exhaling slowly. My hands were stable now. Even though I had just made a decision, my heartbeat continued. Emily saw the shift right away. Her eyes narrowed. What? I met her gaze. You will see. Then I grabbed my keys, stepped out the door, and drove directly to Lauren. Lauren opened the door in an oversized sweater and leggings. Her blonde hair was tied into a sloppy bun. She appeared astonished to see me standing there, my face likely a mask of barely restrained rage. Jason. She tilted her head, a confused expression on her face. Hello, what's going on? I did not respond right away. Instead, I took a calm, steady breath and gripped the doorframe so tightly that my fingers ached. Is Nick home? Lauren frowned. No. He is working late. Why? Perfect. I breathed sharply and nodded to me. Can I come inside? She hesitated briefly before stepping aside. Yeah. Of course. I walked inside. The fragrance of cinnamon candles hit me immediately. Their residence was spotless, comfortable, and cozy. A place founded on trust, love, and partnership throughout time. It made me feel sick to my stomach. I turned to face her. She continued to keep a close eye on me. Concern is gradually creeping into her countenance. Jason, you scare me a little. What's happening? I looked at her, at the way her brow furrowed slightly, and the way she hugged her arms around herself as if bracing for something unpleasant. I hated what I was about to do, but she had to know. I dug into my pocket and took out Emily's second phone. Then, without speaking, I opened it, scrolled through the call log and handed it to her. She took it hesitantly and looked at the screen. Her gaze passed over the name at the top. Nick. I stared as blood drained from her face. For a second, she stood perfectly still. Then she slowly returned her eyes to mine. What? What's this? My throat felt tight. This is Emily's other phone. Her lips opened slightly, as if she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. I could see it occurring in real time. The pieces falling into place, the slow, horrifying awareness dawning on her. Her fingers trembled around the phone. Tell me this isn't what I believe it is. I swallowed forcefully, my jaw straining. Emily was tested for an STD today, I said in a bland voice. She came across as positive. Lauren inhaled deeply and took a half step back, as if I had physically struck her. No. I nodded grudgingly. She attempted to lie about it, gaslight me. She said she had no idea how it happened. But when I checked our phone bill late at night, I noticed this number repeatedly. Calls are private. I breathed sharply. I called it. This phone started ringing from inside my home. Lauren covered her mouth with one hand. Her breathing became ragged. No. Lauren, but she was already moving. She was already pacing, with one palm fisted into her sweater and shaking her head angrily. No. This isn't. He would not. Her voice crackled. They would not. I didn't say anything since we both knew they would. She abruptly stopped pacing and stood in the center of the living room. She has her back to me. Her entire body trembled. Then, gently, she turned around. Her eyes were red-rimmed, yet there were no tears. Not yet. Just rage. Where's she? She asked, her voice unnaturally calm. I exhaled. Home. Lauren nodded once. She then marched toward the front door, pulling her coat from the peg. I followed her without hesitation. Because if there is one thing I want more than anything right now, it is to see the MLS world burn. The drive to my residence was quiet. Lauren sat rigidly in the passenger seat, clutching her phone so firmly I thought she'd break it in half. I could feel the wrath coming from her. And the worst part? I received it. I got it since I felt exactly the same way. By the time we arrived in the driveway, my hands were aching to smash the door open and grab Emily, forcing her to face Lauren in the eyes and acknowledge it. But I didn't have to because as soon as I unlocked the door, Lauren pushed past me, storming inside like a hurricane. Emily. Her loud, caustic voice echoed throughout the home. For a brief moment, there was nothing, just silence. Then footsteps. Emily appeared in the hallway. She was dressed in pajamas with her hair in a sloppy bun. When she saw Lauren, she froze in her tracks. Her face became slack. Lauren. She spoke cautiously. What are you doing here? Lauren took a hesitant step forward, fists clutched at her sides. Emily blinked. What happens now? Lauren laughed with a frigid, humorless tone. Then, in one rapid action, she threw Emily's burner phone to the floor between them. Pick it up, she ordered. Emily's gaze moved to the phone and then back to Lauren. I do not pick it up. Emily flinched. For the first time since it began, I noticed something in her expression that almost seemed like fear. She did not move. Lauren took another step nearer, her voice lowering to a whisper. How long? Emily gulped hard. Lauren and I. How long? Emily's mouth opened and then closed. Lauren's breathing was labored now, and her entire body trembled with rage. She shook her head and gave a wobbly laugh. You were in my house, she snarled. You smiled at me. You played with my children. Emily looked away. Lauren's voice became lethal. You allowed me to complain to you about him. You let me tell you about our troubles for the entire time. She exhaled a trembling breath. You were and asterisk. My husband, Angie, is watching me from behind. Emily's shoulders squared. And, like previously, I watched the instant she decided to double down. She crossed her arms and lifted her chin. You're not sure what you're talking about. Lauren genuinely laughed at that, a wild, almost insane laugh. Then she launched. I hardly had time to react before Lauren seized Emily's wrist and pushed her back against the wall. Emily gasped, her eyes wide. Lauren hissed, "You ruined my family. You betrayed my trust and don't even feel horrible about it." Emily fought with her hold. Lauren let go abruptly and shoved her way. Emily tripped, hitting the wall, her face flushed with rage and embarrassment. For a moment, no one spoke. Lauren inhaled quickly and straightened her shoulders. She turned to me, her eyes sparkling. "We're heading to his office." Emily's breath caught. Laura noticed. She smirked. "Oh, you dislike it, don't you?" Emily pushed her lips into a thin line. Lauren tilted her head. "Are you afraid?" Emily clenched her jaw but said nothing. Lauren turned to face me. "Come on." I nodded once as we walked out the door. Emily eventually broke. "Wait." She cried out, her voice desperate. "Jason, please." I paused in the doorway, looking back at her. She looked little and helpless. Pathetic. I answered her stare with an unreadable face. Then I turned away, and we took off to eliminate Nick. The journey to Nick's office felt like the quiet before the storm. The air was thick with anxiety, and the quiet between Lauren and myself felt almost oppressive. She hadn't said anything since we left the house. She just sat there, holding her phone so firmly that I could hear the plastic casing groan. I realized she wasn't simply angry. She wasn't simply betrayed. She was unraveling. And so was I. Lauren did not hesitate as we approached the building. She was out of the car before I had even finished parking, marching toward the entryway like a woman on a rampage. I followed, my heart racing in my ears. Nick worked in real estate. He had his own office in a sleek, modern structure, with large glass windows that mirrored the city lights. It was after hours, but I knew he was still here. He texted me earlier this week, grumbling about late meetings. About how busy he was. Busy? Yes, right. Lauren pushed the door open, and we walked into the lobby. The receptionist, a young man who appeared just old enough to drink, looked up from his phone. "Oh, hi. Can I help you?" Lauren did not even look at him. "Where is Nick?" The guy blinked, obviously taken aback. "He's at his office, but he's with a client," so she had already moved. The receptionist muttered something behind us, but I ignored him and kept up with Lauren as she went down the hallway. Her heels clicked on the shiny floor. She knew exactly where she was headed. We had visited Nick's business before for barbecues, Christmas parties, and casual drop-ins. But something about this walk felt different. As if we weren't simply approaching a man's office. We were approaching his calculations. Lauren arrived at his door first. She did not knock. She did not hesitate. She simply shoved it open. Nick sat behind his desk, reclining back in his chair, phone in hand. He looked up, startled, and furrowed his brow as he realized who was standing there. "Lauren?" His attention shifted to me. "Jason? What the hell?" Lauren tossed Emily's burner phone on his desk. The room went completely silent. Nick stared at the phone. Then, very slowly, he sat up taller, his expression changing to something I couldn't interpret. He knew. He understood exactly why we were here. Lauren crossed her arms, her jaw clenched. "Say it." Nick's throat popped. "Say what?" Lauren let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "Oh, don't asterisk do that. Don't sit there like you don't know what this is." She leaned forward, palms flat on his desk. "Say it." Nick exhaled deeply and rubbed his temples. "Lauren, let us not do this here, okay?" Lauren gave a sour scoff. "Oh, you want some privacy now? After months of sneaking around behind my back, after you asterisk. Ed is my best friend." And returned home to me as if nothing had occurred. She shakes her head. "No, Nick, you don't have privacy. Not anymore." Nick ran a hand down his face, tired, as if he had been wronged. I clenched my fist. "Do you ever feel bad?" I inquired in my voice. Quiet. Nick gave me a quick glance. I thought I saw them admit their guilt, but then, like Emily, he did what cheaters do. He deflected. "This isn't simply my fault," he explained. Lauren inhaled hard. "Excuse me." Nick slumped back in his chair and shrugged. "Yeah, okay, I have 3 asterisks. Get up." I got it. But let's not pretend our marriage was flawless. "Lauren, you have been distant for many years. Always putting the children first. Always shutting me out." Lauren smacked her palms on the desk so fiercely that I flinched. Nick froze. Lauren was fuming. "Are you serious now?" she hissed. "Are you blaming me? Do you think being distant is an excuse to hurt my best friend?" Nick wiped his face again, as if he was fatigued by having to explain himself. "I'm only saying that it wasn't anything I went looking for." I breathed sharply and shook my head. You're unbelievable. Nick turned to me, his expression hardening. And you? His lips twisted up into a smirk-like expression. Do you think Emily was an innocent victim in this? You think she wasn't talking garbage about you the whole time? I felt my heart beating in my throat. Lauren stiffened. What the hell does that mean? Nick leaned forward and rested his elbows on his desk. It indicates your perfect best friend was complaining to me about how miserable Jason made her, how he was boring, predictable, and did not pay enough attention to her. I tightened my jaw so tightly that it hurt. And you know what? Nick continued, gazing directly at me. Now, she said the same thing about you, Lauren, regarding how you were always too busy being a mother to worry about your husband. How she felt bad for me. Lauren had difficulty breathing. I noticed how her hands trembled slightly, but she did not back down. Instead, she tilted her head and spoke in a dangerously soft voice. So you believed her? Nick exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. It was not about believing her, Lauren. It's just happened. Lauren made a short, piercing sound. Oh, right. It's just happened. She nodded slowly, as if considering something. Then she abruptly dug into her bag and took out her phone. Nick frowned. What are you doing now? Lauren ignored him. She scrolled for a second before holding up the screen. A photo. Nick's face had lost its color. I moved closer, gazing over Lauren's shoulder, and then I noticed it. A photograph of him and Emily together in a hotel room. His hand gripped her waist, and she buried her face in his neck. He took his wedding band off. My stomach twisted. Nick let out a trembling breath. Where did you obtain those? Lauren's eyes blazed. Emily is not as smart as she believes she is. She smirked. It appears she backed up her images to the cloud. And guess who got access? Nick gulped hard. Lauren was not listening. She had already dialed a number. Nick paled as he put his phone on speaker. Who are you calling? Lauren caught his gaze. My lawyer. Nick's eyes expanded. Wait, Lauren, let us talk about this. As the call came in, she simply turned away and stepped toward the door. I followed her without hesitation, and as we walked out of the office, leaving Nick scrambling behind us, I realized something. This wasn't simply about retribution anymore. This was wartime. Lauren and I didn't speak as we went out of Nick's office. We did not need to. She was already on the phone. Her voice seemed strangely calm as she spoke to her lawyer, laying out everything. Nick's affair, the evidence, the burner phone, and even the STD. Her sentences were measured, incisive, and exact. It was like seeing a surgeon dissect a body, emotionless and efficient. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. I drove Lauren back to her place. Neither of us spoke. We were both engrossed in our own thoughts. When I pulled into her driveway, she sighed gently and stared at the darkened windows of her house. My kids are asleep in there, she mumbled. I did not respond. She turned to face me. Then her look was unreadable. Jason. I met her gaze. What are you planning to do? The question lingered in the air between us. I understood what she was asking. Was I planning to divorce Emily? Was I going to struggle to burn everything down as she was? I sighed softly and gripped the driving wheel. I do not know yet. Lauren looked at me for a second and then nodded. She didn't say anything else. She simply opened the door and walked toward her house without looking back. I sat for a long time after she left, simply staring at nothing. And finally, I started the car and headed home. Emily was waiting for me the moment I stepped inside. She was pacing the living room, her arms wrapped about herself, her face pinched with what appeared to be remorse. Almost. Jason. She exhaled, moving toward me. Listen, I walked past her without speaking. Wait. She grabbed my arm and dug her fingers into my sleeve. Please listen to me. I made a slow stop. I turned to face her. She appeared devastated. Her eyes were crimson, and her hair was a jumble. Her entire body was trembling with barely controlled terror. But it wasn't a guilt-induced terror. It was the kind that stemmed from consequences. She said, I have asterisked up. I know I did. I said nothing. But, Jason, you must believe me. I never intended for this to happen. I gave a slow, bitter laugh. Oh. So, what? You tripped and fell on Nick's asterisk. Asterisk? She flinched. I shake my head. I step back and run a hand down my face. Jesus Christ, Emily. Her breath caught. I was lonely, she admitted instantly. You've been so distant recently. So disconnected. And I laughed without humor. Oh, you don't get to pull. That's an asterisk. Asterisk me? I turned to face her completely, my hands locked into fists at my sides. Do you want to know why I've been distant, Emily? Maybe because I work 60-hour weeks to offer you the life you desire. Perhaps because every time I tried to talk to you, you were hooked to your blasted phone. messaging who knows who. Perhaps because I thought everything was fine. In the meantime, you were out there seducing my so-called pal. Her lips moved slightly for the first time. She seems truly speechless. I breathed sharply. You don't get to play the victim here. She swallowed. I understand, do you? I laughed and shook my head. Because, when I caught you, you attempted to gaslight me. You attempted to blame me. So now what? Laura now knows. Nick's world is burning down. You are now apologizing. Emily's jaw constricted. I was afraid. I scoffed. Yeah. Are you scared of being caught? Silence. She did not refute it. That was it. This was the final nail in the coffin. I stared at her for a while before taking a slow, deep breath. I want a divorce. Emily's whole body tightened. Jason, the first do not want to hear it. I shut her off. My voice was steady and controlled. I am done. You've made your choice. You must now adapt to your new situation. She breathed deeply, her hands balling into fists by her sides. So, that's it? She snapped. 7 years of marriage have passed. Just like that. I gave a soft giggle. 7 years of marriage ended the moment you spread your legs for Nick. Emily's eyes sparkled with something. Anger and shame. Perhaps both. She inhaled sharply and shook her head. You are making a mistake. I tilted my head. Am I? You're going to regret this. I smirked. No, Emily, my only regret is that I trusted you. I turned away, walked down the hall, into our bedroom, and took a duffel bag from the closet, packing enough clothes for a few nights. I was not staying here. Not with her. Not anymore. As I zipped up the bag, I heard Emily's voice in the doorway. Where are you going? I didn't respond. I tossed the bag over my shoulder, brushed by her, and went out the door. I wasn't rushing away. I was just preparing because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot did I not stay in a hotel. Did not crash at a friend's apartment. Instead, I drove directly to Lauren's place. I was unsure why. Perhaps she was the only person who genuinely knew what I was going through. Perhaps because I was not prepared to be alone with my thoughts. Perhaps I wanted to know what Nick's next move was. When I pulled into her driveway, I could see the living room lights shining through the curtains. I paused for a second before stepping out of the car and knocking on the door. Lauren responded after a few seconds. She appeared weary. Her hair was a disaster. Her sweater was slightly off her shoulders, and she was holding a practically empty glass of wine. But her eyes. Her eyes were bright, attentive, and calculating. She took one glance at me and exhaled. You left her? I nodded. Lauren took a sip of wine and stood aside. Come inside. I came inside, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Lauren tossed back the remainder of her wine and slammed the glass against the counter. Nick returned home, she said, voice type. What occurred when I straightened? She gave a sharp, bitter laugh. He tried to play it cool at first, as if he were tranquil. I calmed down, but when I informed him I already had a lawyer, he went crazy. I frowned. What do you mean? Lauren turned to face me, completely crossing her arms. He went on a rant about how I was overreacting, and how a single mistake should not ruin everything. Her lips formed a sour smirk. Then get this. He had the arrogance to tell me that I wasn't thinking properly and that we should take a few days to cool down. I gave a dry chuckle. So basically, he believed he could dominate you. Lauren tilted her head. Exactly. I exhaled as I ran my fingers down my face. Jesus. He truly believed he could talk his way out of this. Lauren agreed, her mood grim, and when he learned that wasn't the case, he began threatening me. My head snapped up. What? She let out a slow breath. Not physically, she stressed, but he began talking about the children, about how a divorce would tear them apart, about how he would ensure that I did not have full custody. She scoffed, as if he'd ever been a caring father, as if I didn't have years of evidence that I did everything while he was out playing. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Guy is in the house with Emily. Anger burned in my chest. He is trying to intimidate you. Lauren's eyes blazed. Allow him to try. I stared at her. She was not crying. She wasn't falling apart. She was upset. And honestly, I admired her for it. I leaned on the counter and crossed my arms. So, what is the plan? Lauren breathed sharply and ran a hand over her hair. Tomorrow, I'll meet with my lawyer. I want complete custody. I want the house. And I want every money I am entitled to. I smirked. Good. She looked at me for a moment. And you? What is your next move? I rolled my shoulders and exhaled slowly. I don't just want a divorce, Lauren. My voice was calm and steady. I desire vengeance. A soft smile appeared on her lips. She whispered, that is something I can get behind. I did not go to bed that night. Instead, Lauren and I sat at her dining table, discussing every detail we might use against them. Nick had a lot to lose: his reputation, business, and family. He took pride in being the perfect guy, the terrific father, the wealthy business, and the charming husband. If everybody, even his clients, learned the truth, he would be destroyed. Emily, on the other hand, was about to lose the luxurious lifestyle she had created for herself. No more comfortable residence. No longer adoring husband to support her lifestyle. She was about to be entirely independent. And something told me she wouldn't handle it well. Lauren and I had a solid plan in place by the time the sun began to rise. She went after everything. I was making sure Emily and Nick walked away with nothing. Nick was going to discover what it was like to have his entire world crumble around him. Because this was no longer simply about gaining justice. This was to ensure that they never forgot what they did to us. At precisely 8 a.m., I entered the top divorce attorney's office in town. I was not playing games. I wasn't going to drag this out. I wanted Emily out of my life as quickly and brutally as possible. And if I could ensure that she suffered as a result of her actions, that would be ideal. The lawyer, Mark somebody, was a sharp-looking man in his late 40s, dressed in an expensive suit and exuding quiet confidence. He took a quick peek at the documentation. I had brought bank documents, phone records, and Emily's test results, and he leaned back in his chair, stapling his fingers. "This is bad," he stated simply. I smirked for her. "Yeah." He nodded. "You've got everything you need to bury her in this divorce. Infidelity, reckless endangerment. You could take her for anything." I leaned forwards. "That is exactly what I desire." Mark looked at me for a second and then nodded. "All right. Let's discuss strategy." By lunchtime, I had put everything in action. Divorce papers were being drafted up, financial holdings were being reviewed, and Emily's every dirty little secret was going to be exposed. I did not go home. Instead, I met with Lauren. She was already 3 steps ahead. Her lawyer had been merciless. Not only was she requesting full custody of the children, but she was also demanding a detailed financial examination of Nick's accounts. If he had been sneaky with money, if he had spent a single pooled cent on Emily, he was screwed. We sat in her car outside Nick's office building, drinking coffee and discussing the last arrangements. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Lauren inquired, looking at me over the rim of her cup. I did not hesitate. "Absolutely." She smirked. "Good." Then she took out her phone and pressed send. The fallout began immediately. Lauren had sent a wonderfully phrased email that included pictorial evidence of Nick and Emily's affair, the call logs, and even Emily's STD test results. She forwarded it to Nick's entire office. Every employee and business partner. Every single client. By the time we arrived near the office, it was chaos. Nick's name was being dragged in the mud. His clients were backing out of transactions. His employees were whispering. The best part was that he had no idea what was going to happen. Lauren smirked as she scanned the responses. "It looks like Mr. Family Man is about to lose a lot of money." I leaned back and exhaled slowly. Good. But we weren't finished. Not even close. I finally returned home that evening, feeling lighter than I had in days. Emily was seated on the couch when I entered, clutching her phone with a distressed expression. Her eyes were large. Her lips parted in shock. She looked up at me slowly. "You," she whispered. I tossed my keys on the counter. "Me?" Her nostrils flared. "Did you do this?" I raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" She tightened her grip on her phone. "Nick just phoned me. His business is failing. His clientele are leaving. His staff are angry. He believes Lauren did it. But I know it was you." I smirked. "Oh, Emily, what precisely did I do?" She rose abruptly, enraged. "You exposed us." I laughed, slowly and deliberately. "Oh, sweetie." I moved closer and lowered my voice. "You exposed yourself the moment you decided to screw another man behind my back." Her breath caught. I leaned in, my voice lowered. "Did you think you could do this to me, to Lauren, and simply walk away?" She gulped hard. I pulled back, smirking. "Now you can see everything fall apart." Emily snapped. "You petty and vindictive bastard." She yelled and shoved me. "Do you think this makes you a man? Ruining my life. Ruining Nick's life." I did not move, didn't even flinch. I merely grinned, which made her even furious. "Do you think you've won?" She spat, her eyes glaring. "Do you think I will just let you destroy me?" I exhaled and shook my head. "Emily, you've destroyed yourself. I am just making sure you feel it." Her jaw clenched so hard, I feared her teeth would break. She was infuriated, desperate. Good, because it was only the beginning. Emily moved about the living room like a trapped animal, her hands gripping at her sides. She was angry. Not sorry, regretful, or embarrassed. She was outraged because she had lost control for the first time in her life, and I was watching her burn. You think you can simply pull my life apart and go away? She snapped and spun to face me. I sighed gently and shook my head. Emily, I do not need to tear your life apart. I smirked. You did it all by yourself. Her eyes clouded. Jason, you're going to regret this. I laughed because it was hilarious. I will regret divorcing a liar and a cheater. I raised an eyebrow. I do not think so. She moved closer, her voice lowering to a venomous whisper. You'll regret humiliating me like this, making me look foolish, and causing me to lose everything. I tilted my head funny. This is exactly what you did to me. Emily's breathing became ragged. She was shaking. Now. Not from fear, but from an uncontrolled wrath. For years, she had always held the upper hand. The person who twisted things, manipulated, and lied so convincingly. It felt like the truth. But now she was backed into a corner, and she despised it. I turned to go into the bedroom to get the remainder of my belongings, but something happened before I could take 2 steps. Emily screamed, Lauren is using you. I froze. Slowly, the first stared back at her. Emily curved her lips into a nasty smile. Oh, what? Do you believe she cares about you? That you two are in it together? She giggled and shook her head. She's using you to bring Nick down, Jason. And when she's finished, she'll throw you aside just like she does him. I breathed out through my nose, unimpressed. Wow. I'm used to this. It nearly sounded believable. You should have tried it before I discovered you were a liar and a cheater. She knew. Silence. I narrowed my eyes. What? Emily smirked. Lauren, she knew about me and Nick before you did. I stared at her. Bullshit. Emily shrugged and crossed her arms. Believe whatever you want, but ask yourself this. Why do you suppose she wasn't shocked when you arrived at her home? Why do you believe she already had a plan? Why do you think she had all of those messages and photos ready to go? I clenched my jaw. She knew Jason. Emily continued, her voice tinged with poison. She didn't care unless it helped her. I looked aside, refusing to satisfy her with anything else than her words. They dug in deeply. I hardly slept that night. I told myself that was just Emily being Emily, distorting the truth and manipulating me into second-guessing everything. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't stop. What if she was correct? What if Lauren had known? What if I was so caught up in my own betrayal that I never questioned anything? The following morning, I traveled to Lauren's residence. She opened the door in sweatpants and a hoodie, holding a cup of coffee in her hand. Her brows rose when she spotted me. You look like crap. I did not respond. I immediately stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Lauren scowled and set her coffee down. Jason? What is wrong? I exhaled and wiped a palm over my face. I need to ask you a question, and I need you to tell me the truth. She crossed her arms. Okay. I stared her in the eyes. Did you know Nick and Emily before I told you? Silence. Lauren's entire body remained still. And that was my response. I threw out a sour laugh and shook my head. Jesus Christ. Lauren breathed sharply and ran a hand over her hair. Jason, did you know? I shut her off. For how long? She paused. Several weeks. Several weeks. I looked at her in bewilderment. And you haven't told me? Her jaw clenched. I did not have proof. I had suspicions. I was not going to say anything until I knew for certain. I scoffed. So, you waited till I found out? Until I arrived at your residence with the evidence. Lauren's eyes darkened. Do you think this was easy for me? She snapped. Do you think I didn't want to tell you that? I didn't resent myself for keeping it within. I shook my head and stepped back. You were meant to be my friend, Lauren. Her expression twisted. And you were meant to be mine. I narrowed my eyes. What the hell does that mean? She gave a bitter laugh and shook her head. You truly don't notice it, do you? What do you see? Lauren crossed her arms. Jason, you were not pleased. Not with Emily. Not for very long. I clenched my jaw. She inhaled sharply and shook her head. Did you ever thought about why I didn't tell you? Maybe you already knew. Perhaps part of you didn't want to know. I breathed sharply and ran my palm across my face. Jesus, Lauren, you sound exactly like her. Her eyes blazed. Do not dare. I laughed without humor. What? You're both really skilled at justifying. Asterisk. When it benefits you, use an asterisk T. Lauren shook her head and stepped back. This is not about me. This is not about what I did or did not say to you. This is about you finally acknowledging that Emily was not the only liar in your marriage. I stilled. Lauren's voice sank. You lied to yourself. Every day. I opened my mouth and then closed it. Because she was not wrong. I knew somewhere deep down in the way. Emily, stop touching me in the way. She laughed at her phone, but never at me in the way she made me feel like a burden. I had ignored it since accepting it would have meant admitting that my marriage had ended long before Emily slept with Nick. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. Lauren moaned and rubbed her temples. Look, you're mad at me. Fine. But don't act like I was the reason Emily cheated. Don't act like I was the one who injured you. I breathed sharply. I simply need some time, Lauren. She nodded, and her countenance softened. I got it. I turned toward the door, pausing briefly before stepping out. Lauren's voice silenced me. Jason. I cast a glance back. She retained my stare. Do not let them win. I swallowed hard and walked out. And for the first time since the beginning, I wasn't sure who the adversary actually was. I drove aimlessly for several hours. Everything was pressing down on my chest, making it difficult for me to breathe. Emily betrayed. Lauren's dishonesty. Nick's pitiful justifications. It was all twisted up in a web of lies, deception, and half-truths. But this is the worst part. Lauren was correct. I'd spent years lying to myself and believing everything was all right. Ignoring the indications. I let Emily treat me as an afterthought while convincing myself that it was simply marriage. That things would improve. That if I worked harder, provided more, or just tried, she would stare at me like she used to. I had spent years refusing to accept that a corpse was already dead. And now I was free. Not just from Emily, but from the deception. I stopped into a parking spot overlooking the city and rested my arms on the steering wheel. The sun was sinking, transforming everything into rich tones of orange and gold. It was lovely, serene, and in stark contrast to the commotion I had just experienced for the first time since this whole disaster began. I actually breathed. And then I took out my phone. The divorce papers were submitted the following morning. I did not give Emily an opportunity to beg, debate, or compromise. My lawyer kept the best in the business on quick dial. Within days, everything was in action. Emily did not take it well. She shrieked when she saw the papers. He called me every name in the book. They told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. You're destroying everything we created. She screamed, pacing the kitchen like a madman. I merely smiled and sipped my coffee. You threw it away the moment you brought another man into our bed, which shut her up. Nick, on the other hand, had larger concerns. Lauren destroyed him. The financial audit revealed everything. It turns out he had been spending a lot of their shared money on Emily. Hotels, flights, presents, and even money transfers. Lauren's lawyer tore him apart at mediation. She received everything. The house, full custody, and child support that would have Nick bleeding every month. When the judge ruled in her favor, Lauren turned to Nick with a happy smile and said, "Tell Emily." I said hello. Nick lost his sanity. Lauren left the courtroom beaming. The dust took months to settle. Emily attempted to reach out several times. Weak, desperate texts that I did not even bother responding to. I had nothing further to say to her. Nick, he vanished. He lost his biggest clients. He had to sell his office. Last I heard, he was battling to keep his company viable. And Emily. She didn't exactly choose to be with a broke man. Lauren messaged me one night. Months later, Emily and Nick split up. I laughed, not because it was hilarious, but because it was expected. She'd ruined everything for him. And then things got difficult. She bailed. It was just what she deserved. I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I got my own place. I focused on myself. For once. I started going to the gym, eating healthier, and resuming old activities that I had abandoned throughout my marriage. I lived. And for the first time in years, I felt happy. Lauren and I remained in touch. Not in the way you may expect. There was no romantic tension or vengeance fling. Simply a common understanding. Here's the next story. I swear the air smelled of carnations. Old wood, decades of hypocrisy. Leighton Cathedral has always given me that vibe. Sacred. A little musty and haughty. Its marble floors appeared so spotless that they could reflect the worst of my thoughts if I stood there long enough. That's probably not what the parish board intended when they refurbished the building. But that's how I felt every time I walked through these huge doors. I was meant to be here for a meeting with the wedding coordinator, who claimed to be named Delphi. I believe it was Deborah, but she must have tried to sound sophisticated. The plan was to complete the floral arrangements, lighting angles, and aisle layout. I tried to remain open-minded, but my mood had been ranging from mildly annoyed to wanting to burn everything down all morning. Why? Because Elena, my fiancée, had failed to show there, and I had no idea where she was. Let me correct that. I had an idea, a dark and knowing one. She might have been off to meet him again. Her ex, Damian Baker. Even the thought of that name made my stomach turn. I wondered whether Damian was his real name. Sounds like an obvious villain. He looked like one of those guys in stock photographs. Black hair parted perfectly in a suit that cost a tiny fortune. Leaning back with a smug grin. However, I was getting ahead of myself. I'd come 5 minutes early, expecting Elena to show me her meticulously organized binder of wedding ideas, which she'd compiled with the same zeal she used to check quarterly market performance. Instead, she texted me, "Hey, running late may not make it. Can you handle today?" No emoticons. No. Sorry, no love. You know, looking forward to forever, only that request. As if the wedding were a conference call, I could cover for her. I closed my phone and felt a nasty pang on the back of my tongue. Perhaps I was being theatrical. Maybe I was simply exhausted. Or perhaps she is with him right now. I considered messaging her back, but my phone's battery was at 6%. Plus, I didn't believe I could manage the paranoid bitterness in my gut. Instead, I forced myself to exhale. Relax, James. I convinced myself that you were simply about to marry the lady who I suspected of cheating on you. Not a big deal. You might be wondering how things came to this point. The brief response. I first saw minor fractures around 2 months ago. Elena was often busy, but not like this. She'd arrived home later than usual. It smelled like cologne. That was not mine. We left the living room to make silent phone calls. I asked who it was. She shrugged. Work-related topics. She is a financial analyst for a large investment firm. They do maintain marketplace hours. They also do unscrupulous transactions. But sometimes she'd murder me if she heard me say it. I strolled down the corridor to the side church, where the coordinator had indicated we'd meet. My footsteps reverberated. This property was too huge and too silent. It seemed like the ideal backdrop for someone's outburst. Or maybe for a horror movie about wedding day ghosts. I'd rather see an apparition than the creeping feeling that my fiancé was cheating on me. I was so absorbed in my thoughts that I almost missed the coordinator totally. She was sat on a folding chair in front of a little wooden table, looking bored when she spotted me. She sprang up so quickly that her heavy binder nearly tipped over James Harrington. She asked as she smoothed up her floral pencil skirt. "I'm Delphi. It's lovely to meet you in person." I forced a pleasant smile. "That is me. Hi." I looked around. "No, Elena. Of course not. She will not be joining us." Delphi opened her mouth in a practiced manner. "Oh. As a surprise. Is she okay? A busy day. Last-minute alterations at the firm." I repeated it automatically, like if I'd been repeating the same justification for years. In a way, I did. Delphi's nod indicated that she dealt with high-maintenance brides. Understood. So let's get started straight away. She indicated for me to seat at the table. She'd drawn up designs of the aisle, color palettes for the bridesmaids' dresses, and a list of recommended cello tunes. She went on about how great everything would look if we followed the plan. I tried to concentrate, but my thoughts wandered away. It showed a scene from last week. Elena is in the kitchen looking for coffee at 8 p.m., phone in hand, typing furiously. I recall seeing the corners of her mouth tighten with each subsequent message. She'd claimed it was a coworker nagging her for information. She then left the apartment and went for a little walk around the neighborhood. She returned an hour later and refused to meet. My eyes smelled like a men's fragrance. Something slightly more woodsy than my typical brand. I pushed my gaze back to Delphi's doodles. Pink daisies. White roses. Who cared? She was firing off words that I scarcely heard. "Sure," I said at one point, pretending to be interested while tapping my foot impatiently. Time dragged. I imagined Elena across town. Maybe at an upmarket cafe, with Damien talking about who knows what. Delphi halted. She looked at me closely, as if she feared my mood would ruin her next half hour. "Is everything well, Mr. Harrington? I want to make sure the wedding day represents your vision." I wanted to laugh. My vision. My vision swirled with distrust and fear. "Yes," I lied. "I'm simply a little stressed. Wedding anxieties." "You understand." That made her smile in a condescending manner. Then she started flipping pages in her notebook, discussing how many guests could be seated in the left pew, how the bride's father would lead her down the aisle, and how the officiant would be set up near the dais. I nodded, but each question felt like a nail scraping against my psyche. The wedding was weeks away, and I wasn't sure I still believed in it. We gradually made our way to the front of the cathedral, where high stained glass windows cast colored light across the polished floor. Delphi gestured. "Consider how wonderful Elena's train will look trailing down this aisle." Around mid-afternoon, sunlight from the west lights the bride. I inhaled my fiancée, who was radiant in white. Then I remembered her silver-wrapped dress, which she wore one Thursday evening. I'd inquired where she'd been. She had mentioned a networking event. Except she had no business cards, photographs, or notes. There was a faint scent of men's cologne in her hair. It stung. I massaged my temples. Yes, it would be good. Delphi's phone vibrated. She apologized quietly and took a few steps back before responding. A sense of relief swept over me. At least I could express my anxiety quietly. I turned to look at the line of pews, the dais, the altar, and the gilt cross, which were all grand and serious. We were meant to promise forever here. A vow, one I meant sincerely but wasn't convinced she would honor. I heard footsteps behind me. Delphi reappeared, a smile on her face. I need to lock in the floral orders. Are we all set with the arrangement? We had a discussion. Or did Elena want to make a final change? I shrugged. She has not noted any changes. Great. Then we'll add the white flowers and lilac to the main altar. That's very romantic. Don't you think? Sure, I murmured, so numb that I felt I was on autopilot. We finished up swiftly after that. I gave Delphi a half-hearted handshake. I promised to contact you and then left for the parking lot. The early afternoon sun blazed off the hood of my aging automobile. The seat leather felt burning. I turned the key, but rather than driving away, I sat there, the engine rumbling. I stared at my phone. We have a shared calendar. I noticed Elena had set aside 2 hours for personal tasks. That was code. For what purpose exactly? I chose to drive in a random direction. Clear my mind. The city streets appear normal. Joggers, children with backpacks, corporate people carrying briefcases. I ended up along the river, where ancient factories had been turned into trendy coffee cafes. Elena and I would come here for Sunday breakfast. We'd chuckle at the couples around us who argued over petty matters. We were now the ones at risk. I found a parking spot near a coffee shop and strolled to the waterfront. Rusty benches lined the sidewalk. Gulls circled overhead. It was hot and muggy, and the air was thick with the stench of algae. I sat and let my mind wander. We met 2 years ago. A mutual friend introduced her at a holiday party. She'd gleamed with confidence, discussing foreign exchange movements with as much zeal as some people do about their pets. I was enthralled. I told her I was a history scholar who specialized in examining old writings for authenticity. She laughed. So you spend your days determining if old bits of paper are telling the truth. She found it ironic. She added, that's what I do in finance, except with numbers and spreadsheets. She was correct. In a strange manner, I was the keeper of old truths. She predicted new truths. We fit perfectly. Or so I thought. I found myself pulling out my phone again, forcing it to load my previous communication with her. The conversation seemed so sterile. Me? Don't forget, we have the coordinator meeting with her, correct? Sorry. I got slammed at work. Me? We can reschedule as needed. Her? It's okay. You handle it, I'm sure. Please let me know if you will join her. And then this morning's text. Hey. Running late may not make it. I scrolled, hoping to hear from her. I am looking forward to marrying you. I miss you, but nothing. I called her number. My heart pounded. She did not pick up. Perhaps you're at a meeting or are ignoring me. Perhaps with him. I hung up. I feel a strain coil behind my eyeballs. My mouth became dry, and a bitter taste crept in. Stop. I mumbled to myself. Stop thinking about the worst. Except that's exactly what I was taught to do in my field of work. Assume that every artifact is questionable, until proven authentic. Assess its provenance. Test the paper's age, the ink's composition. Over time, you develop cynicism. You learn to recognize every fault. First, trust only after extensive testing. Suddenly, my phone vibrated with a text from Elena. Dinner with clients. Do not wait. The time was 2:24 p.m. She was currently planning dinner. Was that just an excuse to avoid me all evening? I typed a brief response. Okay, I hope it goes well. Then I did not mail it. I stared at the screen, pondering. I backspace. Instead, I wrote. We need to talk. I hovered my thumb over send. Then I was unable to accomplish it. I deleted everything. Put your phone away. I sat on that bench by the river till the clouds gathered and a nice breeze blew. My thoughts raced with 1,000 scenarios. She's a cheater. She is not cheating. She's in trouble. She is lying. She is bored with me. She is bored with the wedding. My thoughts circled like vultures. By the time I returned to our flat, it was late afternoon. She would not be home. I threw my keys on the counter and stared at the half-completed wedding invitations on the coffee table. Her penmanship on them was beautiful. Such a contradiction. A woman with elegant handwriting. However, he was possibly the most secretive person I'd ever encountered. I rummaged around the refrigerator, located leftover pasta, and ate it cold. I suppose that's how my life is these days. Cold leftovers and a much colder fiancé. My gaze shifted to the framed photograph on the bookcase. We are at Niagara Falls. Both of us are wearing ridiculous plastic ponchos. We were laughing so hard that we almost dropped our phones. That occurred a year and a half ago. Where did that go? I realized I was grasping the fork too tightly and felt a deep aching behind my sternum. I attempted to breathe slowly. Perhaps she was simply experiencing stress at work. It may be that. Perhaps she realized she still wanted Damien. It would not be the first time a fiancé was caught off guard, thus close to their wedding. I'd read enough ancient diaries for my job. Stories of sadness that lasted generations. Humans replicate patterns, generation upon generation. I found the wedding binder she had left on the kitchen table. She had put so much attention into it. Each tab was labeled for decor, music, guests, and efficiency. I turned to the page about the efficient Pastor Truman. We had met him once. He maintained a slight serenity, the type of man who would pray for you on the sidewalk if you appeared depressed. Elena had insisted on him, saying she appreciated his seriousness. I opened a few more pages, evaluating the prices for table centerpieces. Everything was incredibly detailed. She has prominent color schemes, pale lavender white with a touch of silver. That silver detail stood out to me. Her silver-wrapped dress, the one that smelled like cologne. She wore a dress. That suspicious Thursday. A violent burst of rage sprang up. This entire wedding was perfectly planned, yet she couldn't even be bothered to attend the meeting. I slapped the binder closed. My phone beeped when the battery was close to die. Good. Allow it. I wasn't in the mood to read any more ambiguous notes from her. My thoughts turned to the notion of investigating, and actually investigating. In my field, we use tests to certify authenticity. Could I do that in my private life? Can I track her phone or snoop on her? That thinking left me feeling guilty and twisted. Justified. If she was cheating, didn't I have the right to know for sure? But what if she wasn't? I'd breach her trust. Nevertheless, mistrust had its claws in me. My mind was roiled. Perhaps I should engage a private investigator. Did anyone still do that? Was that too cliché? Are you being too paranoid? Eventually, my fatigue outweighed my rage. I shuffled into the bedroom, threw my shoes away, and dropped into bed. The wedding binder was on the desk, teasing me from across the room. White flowers and lilacs, certainly. I awoke at roughly 11 p.m. to the sound of an apartment door opening. The lamp in the living room flickered as quiet footsteps crossed the floor. Elena. I blinked and tried to gather myself. My mouth felt like sandpaper. Shall I face her? I walked out and found her near the kitchen island, looking for a wine glass. She still wore the clean burgundy jacket she preferred for client dinners. There's no knot or anything. A subtle scent of cologne drifted my way. His, or someone else's. She startled James. You terrified me. Sorry, I replied, blinking at the overhead light. Didn't mean to. She hesitated and filled her glass with tap water. You are up late. You just got home and ate a wonderful meal. She sipped, averting my gaze. Productive. My clients enjoy talking numbers at steakhouses. She massaged her temples. Exhausting. Honestly, I examined her face. Fatigue? Yes. Or perhaps guilt. Hard to understand. I wish you had told me. I'd texted earlier. Sorry. She said, curt. She laid the glass on the countertop. Have you met with Delphi? I did, then shrugged. I handled it. She nodded and chewed her lip. I'll read at the notes tomorrow. Sure. Silence pressed between us. She gazed at me, expecting me to yell or accuse. I was tempted, but the dryness in my chest developed into an unusual numbness. I simply couldn't. Not tonight. She offered me a thin, weary grin before leaving for the bedroom. I stood there, heart throbbing, head racing. The city lights shone through the window. My reflection in the glass appeared hauntingly hollow. Suppose she was lying. If she were with him. I have no idea how to repair this. But a small, nagging part of me wondered if I didn't want to mend it. Perhaps I just wanted to expose it. Because if the truth were revealed, I wouldn't feel so ridiculous. That thought shook me. Make it visible. It's like casting a black light on unseen stains. I stepped back into the bedroom. She was already in bed. Eyes closed. He turned away from my side. I slid in silently. I felt her breathing slow and steady, as if she'd fallen asleep in seconds. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The wedding was in only a few weeks. Could I put up with this facade, or should I acquire evidence? I wanted to trust her, but my senses told me otherwise. It was 2:47 a.m. when I drifted off. My final thought was one of sarcasm. Sweet dreams, James. In a few weeks, you will openly commit to being with her. Until death do us part. That is, if she does not leave for a better prospect first. Morning light from the blinds felt like needles in my eyes. Elena was already awake. The shower hissed in the bathroom. I sat up, rubbed the grit from my eyes, and attempted to recollect the day. Thursday. Another day of duties and unanswered questions. I needed coffee terribly. I shuffled to the kitchen and searched through the cabinet for the dark roast. The pot hissed to life, and the aroma filled the apartment. A little consolation, if there ever was one. The bedroom door creaked. Elena walked out. Hair is covered in a towel. She noticed me while searching her phone. Morning. I poured coffee. Want some? Sure. Black, please. I gave her a mug. She seized it in both hands. Blue. The steam sipped. We stood silently, the refrigerator humming. I was wondering if I should bring up last night's meeting with the wedding coordinators, or anything else. But my mouth remained locked. She cleared her throat first. I apologized for being absent. The new project at work is ridiculous. She gave a short, remorseful grin. I will strive to be more present. My sarcasm blazed. Become more present. Maybe next time you won't go for hours smelling like a stranger's cologne. However, I remained silent. Just nodded. I got it. Busy times. Her eyes fluttered. I appreciate you taking care of the wedding details. I will participate more actively shortly. Promise? I forced a half grin. We will see. We drank coffee for a minute. The air seemed dense. She checked her watch. I had to arrive at work by 8 a.m. You? I'll be meeting a friend at the museum about 9 o'clock. I said, which was partially correct. I wanted to visit the museum and talk to a colleague about a new show, but really I wanted to stay busy and take my mind off the seething suspicion. She placed the mug with a quiet clink. James. She started, her voice low. I know I have been distant. I apologize. We can discuss further tonight. Okay, tonight? The first repeated. I'm not sure if I believe it. She glanced at me, as if she wanted to say something else. Maybe reassure me or tell me not to pry. But the moment has passed. She hurriedly dressed and grabbed her keys. See you later. She rushed out, and the door clicked behind her, leaving me alone. I drank my coffee in solitude. I then grabbed my laptop. Before heading to the museum, I specialized in authenticating historical texts. However, I was periodically called to consult on genealogy documents or ancient letters from the state archives. However, wedding planning has recently taken precedence over my job. I sank into the couch, opened my laptop, and the background wallpaper was a photo of Elena and myself shot in a nearby park. She smiled broadly, her hair in a sloppy ponytail. We seemed carefree. My chest clenched with desire for a simpler period. Could that version of ourselves be resurrected? I tried to concentrate on an 18th century letter from a merchant in Boston. The institution required me to verify the letter's validity. The scripts inked the watermarks and style of the wording. My vision blurred. My thoughts returned to Elena. Enough. I shut the file, scowling. I grabbed my phone and considered calling her. No. Too soon. She might still be in transit. I set it down. I contemplated calling a friend. Someone. Anyone. My father lived halfway across the country, and we weren't particularly close on the phone. My mother passed away years ago. I had some contacts at the museum, but they were more like colleagues than friends. I had run an old college acquaintance, but the last I knew, he was in Europe. He shared images from Prague a week ago, drinking something that resembled motor oil. I scanned through my contacts idly. Then I hesitated about Sarah Grant. Sarah was the buddy who first introduced me to Elena, although we rarely interacted outside of group occasions. Can I inquire if she knows anything about Elena and Damien? I laid the phone aside. That might be overly frank. Would Elena brag about her outing to Sarah? Probably not. Sarah appeared overly loyal. She might tell me to speak with Elena, which was part of the plan but not the whole plan. If that makes sense. With a frustrated grunt, I walked into the shower, letting the hot water pummel my shoulders and attempting to wash away the strain. My thoughts started spinning. Strategies for determining the truth. My job taught me one thing: genuine proof rarely lies. An idea formed. If Elena used her phone to interact with him, there would have been call logs, text messages or something. But she probably kept it locked. My thoughts turned to the prospect of phone bill records. People occasionally neglect to hide their monthly account or itemize call logs from the carrier. If I observed frequent calls or texts from the same unsaved number, it might reinforce my concerns. The concept made me feel nervous. However, the alternative, stumbling blind, was terrible. I dressed, grabbed a second cup of coffee, and searched the flat for phone bills. Elena usually handled everything online, but she may have printed anything for her records. She was somewhat traditional. I like to keep track of everything precisely. The living room desk contained a few unopened letters from the phone company. Bingo. My breath caught as I held the envelope. It felt wrong. A significant infringement of privacy. But so is cheating, assuming that's what she was doing. I persuaded myself I had a right to know. I placed a finger beneath the flap and carefully pried it open inside a summary of usage. My gaze darted to the line. Items. Calls were placed. Calls were received. Data use. My phone number had about 15 calls. She had 38. She has always made more calls than me. Not a big deal. But then I noticed one number repeating the 212 area code. The calls ranged in length from 2 to 20 minutes, and were made over the course of several weeks, often late at night or throughout the day. That was obviously not working. Her office number was different. Local. My chest tightened. 212 was a New York City area code. We lived nowhere near New York. Could this be a personal cell? Possibly. Probably. I looked at the times. Several calls approximately 7 p.m. 8 p.m., with some around 10 p.m. That didn't look like normal business hours. I dug deeper. The phone number ended with 7653. I repeated it under my breath to memorize it. My face flushed as I felt a rush of remorse and panic. This was it. That vague suspicion was becoming real. I gently replaced and sealed the letter, attempting to make it appear undamaged. My heart pounded in my ears. So she kept calling someone. It may be an out-of-state friend or family, but she hadn't mentioned them. It may be Damien. Moving from city to city. Could be a new flirtation from Manhattan. It could be anything. But none of it is spelled. She is engaged and faithful to James. The first needed to breathe. I sat on the couch. That number was etched into my memory. Should I make the call from a burner phone? See who responds. This was akin to cloak and dagger. I considered my competence in verifying old documents. I was practically a detective in the past. But for the time being, that was unknown territory. I pushed the phone bill out of sight and grabbed my jacket. I'd go to the museum and bury myself in antiquated writings. I couldn't bear being here right now, in this peaceful place that reeked of her potential lies. The sun shone brightly along the street. Cars pushed past. I climbed into my sedan and headed to the museum. The edifice stood out with its magnificent neoclassical pillars. The location I had formerly considered. I parked my second house and took a deep breath. Perhaps focusing on historical documents might appeal to me. The marble entryway was busy with a noon crowd. Tourists, students, bored retirees. I walked down a side hallway to the staff offices. Travis, my coworker, looked up from his desk and gave me a short wave. James, he said, did not expect to see you. I thought you had wedding stuff. I forced a grin. Yes, that is in progress. He smirked. You will survive. He then motioned to a folder on the desk. Do you have something that would interest you? A letter dated 1790 or such. Some seafaring merchants claim to have encountered sea monsters. Obviously tall tales, although the paper may be correct in its era. Do you mind giving it a glance? Sure, I replied. Lay it on me. Sometimes the best diversion is a good dose of nonsense. I took the folder and moved to a quiet corner desk in the staff library. The above lights hummed. A faint, musty odor emanated from shelves of old manuscripts. I inhaled it. This was my realm. Verifying font styles and comparing watermarks. Analyzing old seals. There is no doubt about loyalty or affection here. This is just raw data. I sat down and glanced at the letter. The penmanship was beautiful. Large loops with sporadic capitalization. The signature. Read them. Holloway. I had checked that name in the maritime records. The paper's edges eventually became visible somewhere. Possible causes include humidity and poor storage. I gave a half smile. This was simpler. I allowed myself to descend into that systematic universe. Minutes turned into hours. My phone vibrated in my pocket several times, but I ignored it. It was approaching midday when I emerged from my bubble. My shoulders felt tense. I stood, stretched, and realized I was hungry. I made my way to the museum cafe. Several colleagues nodded. Hellos. I got a turkey sandwich and found a little table by a window. The city beyond the glass appeared normal. People going about their day. There is no evidence of the emotional turmoil in my life. While I ate, I took out my phone to see what I had missed. Elena sent a text. We will be late again. Sorry. I received a text from an unknown number. I frowned. I opened it. James Harrington. I heard you were the finest at verifying old records. I need your aid with something personal. Could we chat strangely? I typed back. Who is this? No immediate response. Probably a genealogist or collector looking for a side gig. I contemplated ignoring it. However, a second job may be a pleasant distraction. Or perhaps it was a fraud. I ate my sandwich in a few nibbles. Lost in thinking. Elena's message stuck with me. We will be late again. Another falsehood, or a half-truth. Another evening alone. Bitterness rose up. Screw it, I thought. I decided to call the unknown number and see if a new project would keep me busy. Another beep. Another unknown number. My name is Kenna. I received your contact information from an old buddy. Sorry about the weird text, Kenna. That rang. No bells rang, but I typed. That's okay. What is the nature of the project? The reply came within a minute. One probably have some letters and diaries. Something that might require verification. I also heard you were discreet, right? The term lingered in my head. It might be someone with family secrets or stolen information. Who knew? I typed. I can't make any promises without seeing the docs first. Then came quiet. Perhaps Kenna was preparing a more extensive explanation. I shrugged. The museum made an intercom call for me. I put the phone away, returned the tray, and went back to the staff area. Travis probably had more for me. Travis waved me over, a grin on his face. Dude. Guess what? Miss Canning, our wealthy donor, has requested that you speak about historical fraud at our fundraiser next week. I promised her you'd do it. It's good publicity. You won. I exhaled. A fundraiser? On top of wedding preparations. On top of personal drama. Why not? I replied with a wry smile. I'll discuss how to recognize fakes. God knows I have experience there. Travis chuckled, not understanding the implication. Awesome. I will provide you the details. He reached for the telephone. Oh, your fiancée phoned the front desk. She inquired whether you were free at 6 p.m. tonight. Something about dinner. I froze. Really? Yeah. I'm not sure how she sounded. Stressed. I forced a nod. Okay. Thanks. So she called me here? This is not my cell. Did that imply her phone had been compromised? Or she wanted a traceable record? Or maybe she was simply being considerate. At least that was something. Perhaps she has changed her mind about being late. Perhaps she wanted to talk. My chest fluttered with anxiety release. I needed to prepare myself for either her confession or a confrontation over my suspicion. So be it. I spent the remainder of the afternoon tinkering with the sea monster letter, cracking jokes with Travis, and ignoring the gathering dread. My phone remained silent, save for one last text from Kenna. I will explain everything soon. We need to make sure you're the proper person. Strange, but I was too absorbed to care. By 5:00, I'd had enough. I left the museum, got into my sedan, and drove home. My stomach twisted in knots throughout the drive. She was expecting me at 6. Would she genuinely appear or flee again? When I came home, I changed into pants and a nice collared shirt just in case. At 530, there is no indication of her. 550. Nothing. 559, I contemplated the risk that she would betray me. My phone beeped at 604. I'm running behind. 30 mins. I stared at the screen, my wrath rising. Another delay. I typed back, fine, hurry. Then I set down the phone and walked the living room. My reflection in the television screen appeared haggard. Messy black hair and ringed eyes. I felt older than I actually was. The worry was eating me alive. 635, she texted. Almost there, sorry. 650. The door opened. She walked inside. Keys rattle across the table. She wore a black pencil skirt, a pristine top, and her hair put up. She flashed me a strained smile. Let's go, she said quietly. I am starving. I fired back a snide remark. Instead, I grabbed my coat. Fine. She recommended a little Italian restaurant around the corner. We walked in around 7 o'clock. The hostess sat us near a window. A candle on the table. Soft illumination. A romantic scene for two. The irony made me want to either laugh or cry. We ordered bread. Arrived. She fiddled with her cloth napkin. I apologize for the delays, she added without meeting my gaze. I'm really swamped. I studied her. She seems genuinely anxious. Eyes darted. It's okay. I lied. We've both been busy. She smoothed the napkin again. But you wanted to talk, correct? I froze. So she must have detected something. Yes, I said. I feel as if we have been wandering. You travel a lot. Canceling wedding plans. Are you in? I'm not sure. Are you second-guessing us? Her lips parted, causing a glimmer of panic. No. Maybe work is stressful, and the wedding is massive. I just felt her pause and inhale. I feel pressed from all directions. I waited, heart racing. What is the pressure to do? She shakes her head. Just to make everything great. My dad is breathing down my neck. My coworkers expect me to continue performing at high levels. Even with the upcoming wedding. And you? She looked up. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't understand. I understand you want me to be more present. I clenched the table's edge. I want you to be honest. I spoke quietly, with a tiny tremble in my voice. I'd like to know if there's anything going on. Her gaze flickered away. What do you mean? I swallowed. Should I inquire about the phone calls, suspicious cologne, and the ex? My throat felt tight. You don't seem to be telling me everything. She stiffened. That is not fair, James. The first exhaled. I'm not trying to be cruel, but you disappear at weird hours and arrive home late. Smells like. Perhaps some cologne. I do not know. Maybe I am paranoid. Her eyebrows raised. Cologne. Do you think I smell like men's cologne? So that automatically means. I raised a hand. Wait. That doesn't happen automatically, but it's unusual. You have to admit, it's strange. And there's your ex Damien. He's been texting you, correct? She stared at me for a long time. Anger and hurt were mixed in her eyes. Damien called me once or twice about some past financial responsibilities we had. He required documents from our time together. I told you that. Remember? I scoured my memories. She did mention something about old financial information, but it was weeks ago. He is not a factor. She shook her head, adamantly. No, I don't see him. I'm not thinking of him. I am not betraying you, if that is what you mean. A slight sense of relief tried to emerge in me, but doubts persisted. Then came the strange phone calls. The cologne. She sighed, clearly fatigued. Look, occasionally my male coworkers go really close when we talk. Or I'm locked in a cramped conference room. Or I borrow a jacket while the air conditioner is blasting. That's probably what you smelled. The telephone calls. Some of our clientele are from out of state. It is not always local. And the silence because half of them are confidential. James, the first work in finance. People have invested in me. I can't shout about it. Her tone had become abrupt, as if she were reprimanding me. You're letting your imagination go wild. I felt defensive and ridiculous. She had an answer to everything. Was it all reasonable, or was she simply a skilled liar? My chest felt constricted. Okay, I said, swallowing, but I'm not accusing you without justification. It's simply the energy you give off. She placed her napkin down and wiped her forehead. I apologize. Truly. Maybe I have been distant, but it is not because I am seeing someone else. I need to be really clear about it. I love you, James. This wedding is essential to me. Her eyes sparkled in the dim light. However, my career is precarious. I can't afford to slip, or I'll lose everything I've built. I looked into her eyes. They appeared honest. My heart ached. Could I have been mistaken? The phone number keeps repeating. However, it could still be a legitimate customer. 212 Manhattan is a financial hub. I deflated slightly. Okay, I murmured. I suppose I've been overthinking. She leaned across the table to take my hand. I promised to make greater effort. I'll show up at the next coordinator meeting. I will be here. My throat clenched from emotion. I don't want to be the fool, you understand. She grasped my hand. You are not a fool. You are merely stressed. We both are. A slight, timid smile. We will figure this out together. The waitress delivered our spaghetti meals. When the moment passed, we drew our hands back and expressed polite gratitude. I twisted my fork in the sauce, attempting to collect my scattered thoughts. Perhaps I should believe her. Maybe I should let my suspicions go. Because if she was lying, how long could she keep it up for? She would slip eventually. I could see the fissures, yet her expression tonight appeared sincere. I fell in love with Elena. The rest of dinner was quiet yet pleasant. We discussed the coordinators, notes, how many seats we required, and the color design. She teased me for not knowing the names of flowers. I feigned a laugh. I felt my spine relax gradually. She insisted on paying the bill, which felt like a modest gesture of peace. We walked home in near quiet, although it wasn't an angry silence, but rather a halt in talk at the apartment complex entrance. She turned to look at me, her eyes probing my face. I leaned forward and mashed my lips on hers. Her breath was warm, with a trace of red wine. I held the kiss for a second longer than normal, as if hoping to discover pure truth in it. She sighed into me. Upstairs. We parted ways to shower and decompress. I scrolled my phone. A text from an unknown corner. I can meet you tomorrow. I will bring the documentation. Let us say 4 p.m. Landon's Coffee. Part of me wasn't sure I wanted to juggle a hidden side gig, but the other part believed it may be a good mental break. Elena eventually came from the restroom, her hair moist and wearing my old shirt. She slid into the bed beside me. Thank you, she muttered. I swallowed in gratitude for your trust in me. Yes, I replied softly. I'm not sure whether I truly believed it, but I let her believe it since maybe trust was a choice. I had to continue making. I slid one arm around her waist. She felt quite heated. There's no evidence of cologne. She closed her eyes. I breathed steadily. Sleep. We found her fast. It did not find me so easy. I looked at the faint shapes in the room. She sounded credible if the suspicious cologne came from random coworkers. If the phone calls were actually from demanding clients, I might be losing my head for no cause. Perhaps she'd just become better at lying. I drifted in and out, half-lucid nightmares whirling together in one dream. Damien waited at the altar, while I watched her walk down the aisle in a silver dress. I attempted to yell, but I had no voice. The sun shone through the curtains the next morning, casting a soft glow over the room. Elena had already left, though. I overheard the coffee machine's remaining gurgles on the counter. She had left a message for a meeting with her supervisor at 7 a.m. See you tonight. The small heart scrawled at the end brought me some comfort. We were okay, right? I drank some coffee and pushed myself to eat a muffin from last week. It tasted a little stale, but so did my mood. I wanted to keep my mind busy. So I got in the car, went to the library to look up genealogical references for that side project at the museum, and then did some errands. Around lunchtime, I became restless. Elena sent me a text message, and my phone beeped. It's all good. Working late. If you're free tomorrow, let's go to the movies. I typed back in with enthusiasm. Sure, I'm trying to keep things positive. My paranoia needs a break. I had an appointment with Kenna at 4 p.m. at Landon's Coffee. By 3:45 I was outside the cafe. The perfume of fresh espresso wafts through the open door. A cozy setting. Small wood tables. Faux brick walls. I got a black coffee and sat at a table near the window. I stood up. Kenna. She nodded and sat into the chair across from me. Sorry, I am late. Traffic. Her voice had a small wobble, possibly from nerves or caffeine withdrawal. She carried a thin folder under her arm. We exchanged some short niceties. She did not waste time. Leaning forward, she spoke gently. I need someone who knows authentication checks. I've heard via a mutual acquaintance, someone from the museum, that you're discreet and thorough. My curiosity piqued. What is the nature of these documents? She opened the folder and took out some old letters in protective wrappers. These are from my grandmother's inheritance. She died last year. I suspect some are forgeries. My aunt has been fabricating documents to claim ownership of specific properties. Essentially, this is a family drama. I studied them. The document appeared to be rather old, but not particularly ancient. Early to mid-1900s. Perhaps the penmanship was fine, but curiously consistent. My eyebrows rose. So you want me to verify their authenticity? Kenneth nodded, his gaze moving around. Yes, but my aunt doesn't know if I'm correct. She is forging them in order to influence the bequest. I exhaled. It was classic family feud territory. I can provide an initial review. If it becomes more complicated, I will direct you to legal professionals. She bit her lip. I cannot afford high legal bills. But if you could simply certify that they are forged, that might be sufficient. Okay. I drank my coffee. Something about her anxiety felt deeper than a simple inheritance dispute. Why the secrecy? You appeared cagey over text. He gave me a brief look before moving on. I apologize. I am just coping with a lot. My father is in horrible health. The family is pressing me. Forging inheritance documents is a major matter. I cannot let them get away with it. I nodded compassionately. Understood. She slid the sleeves towards me. Here. If you need additional examples for comparison. I brought my grandmother's journals. We are confident that a few letters are genuine. Compare them to the problematic ones. I looked through the diaries. The pages were damaged and yellowed. Interesting pieces of personal history. I will see what I can do. It may take me several days. Can you see how relaxed I am? Thank you. Please let me know your fee. And if you require a deposit, I just need a response soon. I gave a half smile. For the time being, we will resolve the issue. Allow me to perform a preliminary check for free. If it is as suspicious as you claim, I can put it in writing. She looked relieved and searched for her wallet. At the very least, let me buy you some coffee. I waved her off. I already got mine. Do not worry about it. She nodded and then paused. I sincerely appreciate that. James. I heard you're also engaged, so you must be busy. I blinked, wondering how she knew about my engagement. Yes, indeed. A large wedding is coming up soon. She smiled in an odd, courteous manner. Congratulations. I hope everything goes nicely. I faked a smile, ignoring the pain in my gut. Thanks. We discussed further about logistics before parting ways. I walked away with the folder under my arm, feeling a slight thrill of satisfaction. At least I had a problem to solve, something I was genuinely decent at. On the way home, I attempted to ignore my nagging intuition about Elena. She had texted me again. She said she would see me after 9 p.m. That was hours from now. Enough time to conduct a preliminary check on Canis documents from home. The hush was thick. I prepared some coffee and put canvas materials across the dining table, pushing the wedding binder to one side. A strange metaphor for my life. One part has the potential for a future marriage, while the other has the potential for fabrication. As I hunched over the letters, examining Lupe's ink flow and the contour of his signature, I felt a sense of normalcy. This was my jam. This is where I thrived. Time slipped by. I discovered a few obvious inconsistencies. The problematic letters included language that did not appear in her grandmother's journals. Certain pen strokes appeared strained. My suspicion deepened that Kenna was correct. Someone forged these. I typed some notes onto my laptop. That's when the door latch clicked. Elena was home. 8:45 p.m. earlier than promised. She peeked in and saw me working on something. I leaned back. Yeah. A side effort was validating certain family letters. She approached with curiosity. Her face lit up. I stiffened slightly. I did not want her rummaging. She was going to pick one up when I gently tapped her hand. They're delicate, and you know about client confidentiality. She chuckled. All right. She kissed the top of my head and then removed her jacket. Have you eaten? I realized I hadn't even considered dinner. No, I got carried away. Let's order something, she suggested. Pizza, or Thai pizza. That sounds wonderful. We decided on pepperoni and mushrooms. She grabbed the phone and placed the order. Meanwhile, the first tidied the table and carefully stacked the diaries. She gave me an amused smile. You enjoy solving other people's puzzles more than your own, I mumbled. She missed the sarcasm. Or you chose too soon. The pizza arrived, and we stretched on the couch, surfing between channels. She nestled into my side, which was surprisingly pleasant. My tension subsided. She asked about my day. I offered the shortened version. She told me about a large merger that her firm was arranging. She did not mention Damien. She didn't disclose the mysterious phone calls. Maybe she was telling the truth. It was all business. We ended up midway through an old noir picture on television, about a detective who suspected everyone of lying. I noticed the flare of black and white across Elena's face, and the form of her eyes. She appeared exhausted, but honest. My suspicions faded a little more in bed later. She fell asleep soon. I stared at the ceiling, letting the silence of the night wash over me. Maybe we'll be okay. Perhaps she was honest about her work. I told myself to breathe and let the paranoia go. But the remembrance of that phone number flashed through my mind like a neon light. 212. I forced my eyes closed. Elena went early the next morning, but she gave me a quick kiss goodbye, which lightened my mood more than I'd like to confess. I intended to visit the museum for half a day, and then compare more of Kenya's records. My phone beeped as I approached the museum parking lot. A text from Kenya. Found anything? I am anxious, I typed. Preliminary signs point to forgery. She responded with a thanks emoji, saying she needed further analysis, but it was looking positive for your case. I felt a small sense of accomplishment. For a little moment, I felt in control of my life. Inside the museum, I scanned my ID at the staff entrance. Travis greeted me with a grin. Tomorrow's a big day, correct? The fiancé is picking out final decor or whatnot. I blinked. Right. We had informed Delphi, the coordinator, that we would finalize the centerpieces tomorrow. Yes, that is the plan. She said she was free in the afternoon. He smacked my shoulder. You've got this. Then you can bury yourself in dust and ink once more. I smiled weakly. Thank you, Travis. I spent the morning finishing the sea monster letter report before heading to the museum cafe for lunch. My phone vibrated. Midnight. Another unknown number. I responded warily. Hello? Silence. Then a breath. James. The man's voice is low. This is Nathan Carr from the Redwood Law Group. My spine clenched. Redwood Law was a top-tier law practice. Yes. Did I do anything? He gave a half laugh. No. Miss Kenna referred me. She stated that you were analyzing some documents about her grandmother's estate. I exhaled. Yes. We haven't finalized anything, though. Nathan's tone was pleasant yet forceful. She asked me to confirm a few details. We could perhaps establish a case. Are you comfortable testifying, if needed? I swallowed. This quickly intensified. If forgery is established, and a court case occurs, I can provide an expert opinion on the documents. But let us be clear. I am not an attorney. Nathan appeared satisfied. We just need your professional opinion. Miss Kenna is desperate to defend her father's interests. Anyway, apologies for the strange call. Good day. He hung up. My appetite had soured. This was becoming serious. Fine. I do my job, but I didn't want to be drawn into a family feud. With a groan, I pushed my plate aside, checking the time. It's already 1 p.m. My phone beeped again, but this time from Elena. I'm free tomorrow after 2 p.m. for decor items. Allow Delfino. I typed an affirmative response and added a quick look forward to it. A minute later, she texted the heart emoji. My chest warmed. Perhaps she was making a genuine attempt now. That afternoon, I exited the museum early. I drove home, planning to delve deeper into Kenny's diaries. The sun glinted off car hoods in a steady midday rush. My shoulders relaxed, expecting a pleasant, productive evening with Elena's company if she arrived home at a reasonable time. At the flat, I discovered that the mailbox was full with rubbish. I flipped through it absent-mindedly. Then I noticed a basic envelope without a return address. My name is typed. I tore it open, expecting a random advertisement. Instead, I discovered a single sheet. James? No. Your bride? Her ex is not just an ex. She isn't who you think. A friend? I just stared. My pulse pounded. The text was typed. No handwriting. Could this be a joke or a serious warning? My mind whirled. I looked around the empty hallway, expecting to find someone lurking. Nothing. Tension curled in my stomach. Not who you think. My old worries roared back. I hurried into the flat and locked the door. I reread the note, looking for hints. The paper was generic, with no postmark, indicating that it was most likely dropped in person. My face burned. Could this be Damien's way of messing with me? Or from someone who was aware of her previous relationship? I sank into the sofa. My breathing became labored just as I'd begun to trust her again. This arrives. Was this just a cruel joke? My phone clattered against the coffee table. Should I call Elena to demand an explanation? Or is that insane? She could not even be aware of this note. I walked the living room, the letter quivering in my hands. Calm down, James. This might be a random envious acquaintance or someone looking to cause trouble without evidence. It's only words. Then there's the weird phone calls, the cologne, and the ex. I was right back at square one. My delicate sense of normalcy crumbled. I decided without approaching her. Instead, I captured a photograph of the note, saved it. Then I placed the paper in a drawer. My pulse pounded with adrenaline. The feelings of betrayal and paranoia intensified. I felt tricked, as if I were a character in someone else's dark drama. I poured a stiff drink, which I rarely did, and sank into the couch. My cell phone vibrated. Elena sent a text. We'll eat dinner at 7 tomorrow and then meet Delphi. Sounds good? I typed back. Yes, certainly. My mind was miles away, focused on that note. No. Your bride. Maybe she was exactly who I expected. Perhaps everything she said was an elaborate falsehood. I attempted to distract myself again with Kenneth's diary. It worked for a while, examining antique handwriting and cross-checking phrases. But every few minutes, my gaze shifted to the drawer. That note was like a ticking bomb. By 8 p.m., I was pacing the hallways. I wondered whether to call Kenna or go for a run. Perhaps fresh air would help. While reaching for my sneakers, I heard a key in the door. Elena. I looked at the clock. She arrived early. The door opened. She stepped in, arms full of groceries. My pulse quickened. Hey. She greeted with a bright smile. I figured we could cook tonight. I paused. She seemed so natural. So domestic. Sure, I managed to force a smile that most likely appeared phony. She laid the items down and turned to me. You okay? You appear pallid. I shrugged. It was a rough day at the museum, that's all. I avoided her stare, not wanting her to notice the storm in my eyes. She looked at me for another time before turning to unpack the items. I got some vegetables. Chicken, figured we could do a stir-fry. That seems good. My voice felt hollow. She started chopping onions on the counter. Do you have any luck with your side project? I cleared my throat. Yeah, looks like a forgery. She whistled quietly. Family drama. Big time. That is unfortunate. She paused. But good. You are helping them. Perhaps it will take your mind off wedding-related stress. A tiny laugh. Wedding stress. Right. I put on a saucepan to boil water, even though we didn't need it for the stir-fry. I was that out of sorts. My thoughts toyed with the idea of presenting her the anonymous note and demanding answers. But a whisper in my head whispered, wait, if she's lying, she'll just cover it up. If she is innocent, you will appear paranoid. So I didn't say anything. We cooked side by side. She makes fun about my knife abilities. I replied with forced giggles. Finally, the lunch was ready. We sat at the table, with steam rising from our plates. She discussed her day, some small office gossip, and the approaching firm retreat. I gave half answers, and occasionally nodded. The message in my drawer seemed like a lead weight on my thoughts. She frowned. After a few minutes. Hey, are you sure you're okay? I forced a casual shrug. It's just mental tiredness. Old documents are playing with my sight. She attempted a cheerful grin. Do you want me to feed you a spoonful so you can rest your eyes? I managed to smirk. I'm good. Thanks. Her expression relaxed. She stretched across and grasped my hand. I can't wait until the wedding is finished and we can just be ourselves again. That might have reassured me. Except, a part of me wondered. So you can continue to tell lies without suspicion. I felt nauseous. Yes, I said. I agree. We completed dinner in near silence. She washed the dishes, humming sweetly, while I withdrew to the bedroom and rummaged aimlessly in the wardrobe. I wasn't looking for anything, I just wanted an excuse not to chat. My phone went off a couple times in the living room, but I ignored it. An hour later, she joined me in the bedroom, playing with her cell phone. Then she snuggled up to me. Movie. Sure, we discovered some weird comedy on Netflix. She snuggled near my chest. I attempted to breathe normally, but my head kept screaming about that note halfway through the movie. My phone beeped again. This time, I checked it. Kenna messaged me about the diaries. I responded with a few brief lines. Ignore Elena's look. She raised an eyebrow but did not respond. In that instant, I knew how we may distrust each other. Keep secrets. She asked about my phone. About her phone. Excellent dynamic for an engaged pair. Finally, we turned off the television. She was nodding off, head on my shoulder, looking so relaxed that I nearly thought we were a normal couple. I slowly withdrew myself and turned out the lights. We went to sleep. Or she did. I laid there with my eyes open, remembering. The typed words gleamed. She isn't who you think. It took everything in me not to go up and face her. Right then, what if the note was speaking the truth? My mouth became dry. My stomach churned. Why would they do this if everything was a lie? Hours passed slowly. She sighed quietly, occasionally stirred, yet never really awake. My mind. The world has 1,000 options. By the time the first rays of dawn broke through the curtains, I'd made my decision. An uneasy one. I was going to check if I could discover more solid evidence. If Elena were as sincere as she seems, there would be no secrets to uncover. If not, I would lay everything out. I gently sneaked out of bed because I needed to find out before we stood at the altar at 5:30 a.m. She was still sleeping. I tiptoed into the living room and looked for the phone bill envelope again. The 212 number did, in fact, repeat. I wrote it down. This time, I was going to call from a blocked number. See who responded. Or perhaps I'd perform a reverse lookup. My heart pounded at the thought. I felt like a spy in my own house. James, the first heard a voice behind me. I almost dropped the packet. I spun around. Elena stood in the hallway, her hair unkempt, wearing my old t-shirt. She blinked. Groggy. What are you doing now? For a fleeting second, I considered hiding the phone bill, but that would look bad. So I feigned a nonchalant shrug. Just searching for some receipts. I woke up early. Couldn't sleep. She scowled and massaged her eyes. Is everything okay? Yeah. I lied, inserting the envelope into a stack of mail. Go back to bed. I will join you soon. She hovered for a second, as if suspicious, before nodding. McKay. She gave a pat back. My heart pounded. I nearly dodged the topic, but I couldn't continue dancing indefinitely. By the time I summoned the confidence to conduct an online reverse phone lookup, the sun had risen. People outside rushed to work. The search yielded no definitive results, only a vague suggestion that it was a cell phone in Manhattan. There's no name or address. I could try calling, but the thought made my adrenaline jump. Maybe later, when I wasn't going to have a heart attack. I eventually slumped into the couch, allowing the stress to whirl. The wedding was close. My fiancé might be lying. An anonymous note told me that I just had indirect evidence. And here I was, a self-proclaimed authority on authenticity, failing to authenticate my own relationship. The irony scorched. Elena stirred, took a shower, and dressed for work. She kissed me farewell. She promised to meet with me in the afternoon to finalize the decor pick. I nodded. I tried to smile. The door closed behind her, leaving me in a quiet apartment. My exhalation was long and raspy. Then my phone vibrated. Kenna sent an SMS. I have new documents. Urgent. Can we meet soon? I typed back. Afternoons are booked. Evening is possible. Let me know. At least I had a side project to keep my mind from bursting. Because I had a feeling that as we progressed through the wedding tasks, more facts or lies would be revealed. And I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the outcome. I began the day feeling as if I were imprisoned in the opening credits of a slow burn thriller. with static graphics flickering ominously, and no one knowing what's going on. My eyes awoke to early sunshine, and my pulse hammered as I remembered the message in my drawer, typed on plain paper, informing me I didn't truly know my fiancée, and that she wasn't who I believed. A fresh ring of tightness formed around my chest, so tight that I almost screamed, but I didn't. Screaming is rarely effective before 7 a.m. The space next to me in bed was unoccupied. Elena always departed early. These days, I had no idea if she was genuinely going to the office or meeting that mysterious 212 number, or if she was being truthful about anything, and I'd become a nervous wreck. Not the best look for a groom. Tobe. I rolled out of bed with a dull aching in my back and padded to the bathroom. Coffee comes first, followed by a shower. Sainthood ranks third. Assuming I survived the next few weeks. The wedding was quickly approaching, with an infernal countdown clock running in my thoughts. I spotted a sticky note on the mirror while meeting with my father to refinance. We will meet you at the florist after 2 p.m. Do not forget. Love you. I reread it 3 times, searching for hidden meaning. I found none. Maybe she just wrote it hastily, threw it on the mirror, and left me. Dad refinances. Right? Could be. Her father was very active with her job, and the wedding funds. He insisted on paying for half the reception. Partial generosity. Flexing only partially. Perhaps that was her cover tale for hooking up with someone, and falling in love with them. Possibly an afterthought. But it nevertheless made my throat tighten with conflicted feelings. I slurped my coffee with no desire for breakfast, and jumped into the shower. My thoughts circled the same dark hole. Who authored the note? So, what precisely did it mean? She isn't who you think. I recalled memory pieces from the last few years. Elena and I seemed to be in perfect harmony. Except for the casual way she mentioned her ex, Damien, like if he were a footnote. Perhaps he wasn't a footnote. Perhaps he was the sequel. I dressed in denim and a collared shirt. Good enough for meeting the florist. The wedding coordinator. Delphi would be there, and Elena and I were going to finalize the centerpieces. The concept elicited a mixture of frustration and horror. It's difficult to focus on vases and daisies when you believe your bride is living a double life. 10 a.m. At my dining table, I piled Kennedy's diaries, forgeries, and the second set of strange letters she had handed me the night before. Given everything going on, I agreed to visit her again shortly. She texted me 1 hour ago. Please provide updates as soon as possible. My aunt is pushing for a formal reading of the will in 2 weeks. I thought sourly. 2 weeks to show forgery. My wedding was hardly longer than that. We were each overwhelmed by our own deadlines. I typed a brief response. Initial examination reveals strong indications of forgery. Let's meet tomorrow. I'd like to discuss this. She replied with a grateful thumbs up. She also posed a side inquiry. Have you heard that Redwood is calling me again? They suggested they might consult you on testifying. I sighed. Redwood Law had contacted me the other day. I was no stranger to legal issues, but juggling Canna's situation with my own was an emotional minefield. I slipped into the chair and scanned the forgeries. The pen pressure was too. Even people's handwriting varies, particularly among the elderly. The vocabulary was inaccurate by enough that a half-trained eye could detect the mismatch. I started typing a bullet point summary. Mismatched vocabulary. The use of modern slang and archaic letters. Inconsistent pen stroke. Not matching grandma's journals from the same time period. Identical signature loops appear in several papers. Suspiciously uniform. I was so engrossed that I almost jumped out of my skin as my phone vibrated across the table. I grabbed it, half anticipating more from Kenna instead. The call came from a private number. My heart pounded. Could it be the phone number 212? Elena's secret? I stared at the screen. I forced myself to click accept. Hello? I attempted to keep my voice steady, then heard a tiny stir. James Harrington's male voice was muted and echoed slightly. Yes, I replied, palms sweating. You need to be cautious about Elena. The voice was as taut as a stretched rubber band about to shatter. This is a warning. My pulse quickened. Who is this? Does not matter. A pause. Stop digging or you'll regret it. The call went dead. I sat there, phone to ear, my thoughts racing with panic. A blatant threat ordering me to stop digging. But I was not aggressively digging. Unless you include combing through phone bills or mentally rehearsing questionable behavior as digging. Did that count? I willed myself to breathe. Okay, this took the anonymous note to the next level. Perhaps the same person authored the note. Perhaps someone intended me to remain in the dark. Let Elena do what she wants. Perhaps it was an odd joke. My instinct told me it wasn't a prank. The sheer strain in that voice seemed too real. My gut churned from bewilderment and anxiety. I attempted to recall any details about the voice. Medium pitch. No distinguishing accent. Could this be Damian? Could this be Elena's business associate? The call was from a blocked number. Stop digging. Right. Sure. Let me pretend I've never heard that. Easier said than done. I spent the next hour in a mental tizzy. I'm half inclined to phone Elena. I'm half tempted to call the cops. But what exactly would I tell them? Some unknown creep threatened me about a fiancé who may be cheating. Right? That would work beautifully. Eventually, I forced myself to dress properly and concentrate on the florist meeting. If Elena showed there, maybe we'd have a chance to talk. Let me check whether her expression gave anything away. 2:30 p.m. The florist store was a small, sweet-smelling nook in downtown. The woman behind the counter looked like she had stepped out of a flower catalog, with a pastel apron and an even bigger grin. I promised Delphi we'd meet her here. However, Delphi was not in sight. I checked my phone. Elena and Delphi have not left any messages. Great. Another waiting game. I hovered awkwardly near a display of lilies, enjoying the delicate perfume. That phone call whirled through my mind. Ken documents an anonymous note. My existence was a swirling patchwork of secrets. Suddenly, the florist inquired whether I needed assistance. Not yet, I responded with a fake smile as I waited for my fiancé. Minutes went by. 5, 10, 15. The florist gave me the pitying gaze reserved for men who know nothing about bouquets. I exhaled. Elena arrived late again. Perhaps she'd completely ignored me. When the door chimed, Delphi dashed in, binder clutched to her chest. She appeared startled, her cheeks flushed. James, the first sincerely apologize. Traffic was a nightmare. I tried to keep sarcasm to a minimum. Not an issue. Is Elena with you? Delphi looked around and grimaced. I figured she would be here. She texted me last night to confirm 2 p.m. She checked her watch. It's almost 3. I grinded my teeth. I was used to this, but something about today's strain made me seethe. She stated that she definitely shows. I guess it's another work crisis. Delphi smiled tightly. So, let's choose the centerpieces we had on the table the last time. Perhaps she will join us if she is able. I nodded, ignoring the churning rage in my stomach. We went to a side area where samples were presented. Vases. Floral arrangements in pastel or bright colors. Delphi began flipping pages in her binder, pointing at photographs and spitting off price figures. Meanwhile, the first nodded absently, half listening and partly wondering if Elena was with that 212 caller, meeting with her father, or doing something quite different. Time passed, and the florist spoke out. Occasionally, we can arrange white roses with baby's breath in crystal vases, or we can integrate silver ribbon to complement your motif. She looked at Delphi, then at me. We have a great offer on peonies for mid-season weddings. Slightly more cost-effective. Cost-effective. If only my sanity could be so inexpensive. I rubbed my temples. Sure. Let's use the silver ribbon option. I believe Elena prefers that. Delphi scrawled notes. The florist nodded. We worked out just how many arrangements we'd need for the reception. I tried not to think about the notion that I might be paying for a wedding that had gone wrong, or that I might be binding myself to a lady who had more secrets than I could have imagined. At 3:30 my phone vibrated with a text from Elena. I am terribly sorry. An emergency arose. Did not make it. You manage. We'll call you soon. My blood simmered. You manage. A classic line from her. I typed back. We are leaving immediately. I suppose it's done. Then I put the phone away, ignoring the outpouring of frustration. Delphi must have detected my rage because she smiled sympathetically at me. Weddings may be stressful. She is definitely juggling a lot, right? I gave a strange shrug, not trusting my voice. We expressed our gratitude to the florist. They parted ways. Delphi tottered away, promising to email me an itemized list. I stormed out into the midday sun, resisting the impulse to throw my phone on the sidewalk. Could Elena not even set aside an hour to confirm her own wedding flowers? She used to be quite organized. On top of that, this seemed like sabotage or disinterest, and I couldn't decide what was worst. I got into my sedan and inserted the key into the ignition. A flood of bitterness swept over me. The unknown called the note. Her continuous absence raised the notion that I was a fool dancing to her tune. I smacked the steering wheel. Then I discovered Elena's second SMS had arrived moments ago. James, the first sincerely apologize. We will make it up to you. Let's have dinner tonight. 7. Right. Another dinner? Another opportunity for her to sweet-talk me into forgetting. I'm a skeptical fiancé. My heart ached. I typed something curt. Fine. Then I pulled away from the curb and headed home. All the way back, I imagined how supper would go. She'd be repentant. feed me lines about how insane the work was. Perhaps she'd discuss her father's outburst about wedding expenses, or the firm's major project. I'd ask about the phone call and the note. She would feign ignorance. I would either believe her or not. That was the script. Over and over. Unless I had modified it. 7:15 p.m. She was late again. I sat at a corner table in a small Italian restaurant that we had visited a few nights before, studying the menu. Appetite is dead. My water glass had already been refilled twice. The servers regarded me with courteous sympathy. I pondered buying an appetizer to alleviate my frustration, but I chose to wait. At 7:25, she hustled in a fitted black dress and slightly windblown hair. She looked stunning, of course. My chest constricted with the usual mix of need and rage. She saw me and gave a short wave. "I'm sorry," she whispered and moved into the seat across from me. "Traffic again?" "Sure. Traffic is usually the scapegoat." She exhaled. "Thank you for taking care of the florist." "I owe you." The waitress arrived before I could react. We ordered fast. Pasta and house wine. Elena tapped the table. "James, the first am serious. I appreciate everything you are doing." A wave of bitterness erupted within me. "Sure, you do." She understood my tone. What is that intended to mean? I breathed and then charged in with more aggression than I wanted. "It indicates you did not appear again. You keep neglecting wedding details. Then you text me, handle it, apologize, love you, etc. I'm beginning to believe you don't care about this wedding at all." Her mouth widened, and her eyes flashed. "That is not fair." I gave a quick laugh. "Isn't it because I'm the one who rearranges my schedule to stand around picking centerpieces alone?" She leaned forward, her voice quiet yet intense. "I care. God, James, do you think I want to manage 1,000 situations at once? My father is questioning me about prenuptial agreements. The firm is pressuring me to sign up for that and other abroad projects." I cut in. "You never addressed it because it just came up last week." She ran her fingers across her forehead. "I haven't decided whether or not to do it, but I need to keep all of my choices open. Right? The wedding costs a fortune. My father is promising me more money if I assist him close a few business. I'm just in over my head." She exhaled. Shoulders are drooping. "But this doesn't imply I don't want to marry you." Her earnestness was plausible. The waiter arrived with the poured wine glasses. We each said a polite thank you. Elena sipped, set the glass down, eyes fixed on me. "Could you just trust me? Or give me the benefit of the doubt?" I glanced at my reflection on the wine surface. My throat felt tight. Should I mention the note? A phone call? Something in her expression hinted. She was already close to breaking point. But if she was actually hiding anything, it could be an act. I tested the waters by asking a query. "Is Damien in town?" I asked quietly. She blinked, face blank. "Not that I know of. He travels for business, I believe." "Why?" I observed her expression. She seemed genuinely perplexed. Or even a wonderful actress. "No reason. It's just been on my mind." She shakes her head. Frustration simmers. "As I already stated, Damien is no longer a part of my life." I nodded but did not pursue further. I was fatigued. The phone call threatened to stop me from digging. Fine. I'd keep the note and phone call to myself for now. Nonetheless, I felt compelled to express some of my dissatisfaction. "Can we at least plan the next wedding together? Everything. Cake taste, music choosing, and so on. Because I feel like a one-man show." A glimmer of guilt appeared on her cheeks. "Yes, absolutely. I pledge to be there next time. Let us do the tasting next Tuesday." She stretched for my hand across the table. "I love you, James. Don't let these difficult weeks ruin everything. We can get through this." Her hand was warm and trembled slightly. I considered pulling away, but I couldn't. I let her hold it. "Okay," I whispered. Perhaps I was drawn to her brand of genuineness. Or perhaps I wanted to believe it so much. We ate quietly, with anxiety remaining. The talk went to minor details concerning the guest list. A cousin's out-of-state RSVP. An old acquaintance who had recently gotten engaged, strangely. We discussed honeymoon plans in hazy terms, like if we still believed in the fairy tale. By the time we left Ways, she had told me she needed to spend the night at her father's house to do some paperwork. I just nodded, too exhausted to argue. She kissed my cheek outside the restaurant. "I will text you tomorrow," she promised. Then she vanished into a rideshare. I watched the taillights vanish in the darkness. My heart felt heavier than ever. I drove home in a stupor, recalling the night she refused to explain why she was always late. No mention of the questionable phone number. But she'd shown me signs of stress. That may be real. If so, perhaps I was being unfair. If not, I was the town's biggest sap. Inside the flat, I walked to the bedroom, disregarding the rumpled wedding binder on the coffee table. I opened the drawer and stared at the typed note. No. Your bride? Well. I fingered the edges. Then I put it back, closing the drawer. My palm trembled as I remembered the mystery caller who told me to stop digging. Perhaps I should. I told myself. Perhaps ignorance is bliss. But deep down, I believed ignorance was a clever euphemism for stupidity in this case. My sleep that night was filled with half-formed horrors. I awoke, drenched in perspiration. A light dawn colored the sky, and my heart pounded as if I had ran a mile outside. Elena, assuming she's telling the truth, was at her father's. I pondered calling him to check this. I felt desperate and paranoid. So, I didn't. Instead, I drank a glass of water, sat at the living room table, and opened my laptop to complete Kanna's forgery study. The systematic procedure of confirming ink strokes calmed me down for a while. By 9 a.m., I had completed a concise report summarizing the findings. Kanna contacted me that we could meet at 11 a.m. at her father's house. I replied that I'd be there. Another father's home. Another domain with possible secrets. Fortunately, I was used to it by now. 10:45 a.m. I got into the sedan and entered the address she supplied into my phone's GPS. It took me to a nice community with manicured lawns and stone roads. The kind of place that screams stable families, except that half of them most likely have the same quiet nightmares as I do. I parked and walked up the road to a modest two-story with burgundy shutters. Before I could knock, the door opened, presenting Kanna in a basic shirt and jeans. She seemed exhausted. She had dark circles beneath her eyes. Hey, she remarked in a breathy tone. Thank you for attending. She led me into a comfortable living room, where an elderly man sat in an armchair, a large blanket covering his lap. He had Kenny's auburn hair, but it was thinning, and a tired countenance. She introduced us. My father, Patrick Miles, this is James Harrington, the handwriting expert I described. Patrick offered his thin hand. I shook it gently. His grip was very strong. Thank you for your help, Kenny. My health precludes me from pursuing this legal foolishness. She's been handling the majority of it. I nodded and sank into an armchair. I'm sorry for your family's hardships. He grimaced. Troubles? Right. My sister Kenny's aunt wants to claim the possessions that my mother left to me in her will. She claims the amended will says otherwise, but we believe it is all a fraud. He coughed a ragged sound. Kenny offered him a drink of water. She appeared apprehensive. I opened my folder and pulled out the typed summary. According to what I've seen, there are significant clues. The new documents are fraudulent. The handwriting does not match your mother's known samples, and the text includes details she would not have used. Can I let out a breath? Is there relief on her expression, so we can fight it in court? I nodded. It should hold. If this goes to trial, you should certainly seek a second opinion from a reputable forensics lab, but I am happy to submit an initial expert statement or affidavit. Patrick's face brightened up with cautious hope. That is fantastic. Then he hesitated, his voice quivering slightly. My sister is endangered. Legal action was taken. She is well connected and has money. But the truth is on our side, correct? I squeezed my lips together. In my experience, truth is strong if you can communicate it well. I assume Redwood Law can handle it. Kenna nodded. They appear capable. We only wanted your analysis to enhance our stance. Thank you, James. I gave a little smile. I'm happy to help. At the very least, helping them felt straightforward. Something black and white in a personal existence that is otherwise filled with cloudy grays. I felt a stab of envy. Kennedy's debacle may be resolved with a court hearing. My mess could blow up on the wedding day, or sooner. Patrick coughed again, wincing. I rested a soothing touch on his shoulder. Dad, you should rest. I will see James out. He nodded, his eyes dropping as Kenneth guided me to the door. She muttered. His health is weak. This legal battle is the last thing he needs. She hesitated and turned to face me in the hallway. I cannot thank you enough. Not an issue. I replied quietly. Please keep me updated on any progress. She hesitated, her gaze flickering downward. You seem worried. Are you okay? I feigned a laugh. Is this that obvious? She shrugged. I suppose I notice whatever I can do. The question took me off guard. I contemplated informing her about my own stupidity. Anonymous comments. Threatening phone calls. A fiancé who may be lying. But it looked like throwing personal burden on a near stranger. I am fine. I lied. It was just wedding jitters. She frowned sympathetically. So, if you need a friend or something, I have large ears. Not physically, but you understand. She tried a light-hearted joke. I liked the gesture, however. I scarcely know her. I gave a modest nod before slipping out. The midday heat blazed. Notwithstanding the little gratification of assisting Kenna and Patrick, my personal life weighted me down like a rock. For a time, I drove aimlessly, thinking about how silly it was to let mistrust corrupt my brain. Then my phone vibrated. Elena, Elena. Hey, done with Dad. Let's have some fun this evening. Perhaps cocktails. I stared at the screen. She rarely initiates social events anymore. Was it an olive branch, or was it a diversionary tactic? Possibly both. I typed. Sure. Meet me at Redwood Lounge, at 6 a.m. She replied with a heart emoji. My gut twisted, half hopeful and half nauseated. The Redwood Lounge, located near the museum, was a decent pub with a laid-back atmosphere. If she was playing me, I could tell by the look in her eyes. 6:10 p.m. I sat on a leather stool in Redwood Lounge, twirling a gin and tonic that tasted like watery lime. The air smelled of old wood and subtle beer. Soft jazz playing in the background. The front door opened, bringing in a slant of twilight light. Elena slid in and scanned the throng. She wore a teal blouse and pencil skirt. Our eyes met, and I felt that familiar tug of longing and heartbreak. She approached and gave me a short embrace. Hey, I apologize for being late. I just finished talking with Dad about some contract details. She slid into the stool next to mine. I managed a faint smile. Not an issue. I got beverages G&T for myself. You can have some wine if you wish. She nodded, and I indicated to the bartender. He poured a glass of white. Elena sipped and then exhaled. I needed it. We exchanged pleasantries. She asked about my day. I informed her that I would be confirming documents for Kenna. She seemed politely intrigued, though I kept the specifics vague. Then the talk slowed. Her eyes had a restless gleam, as if she was thinking of something else. Finally, she put her drink down. So you have been on edge. Not that I blame you. We are under so much strain. But is there anything specific that bothers you? I examined her face. The earnestness seems true. Maybe I'd press a little. Actually, yes. I took a breath. I feel like we've strayed. You're not as present. You cancel wedding plans, and there are strange indicators. She frowned. Weird signs. Remember those phone calls? What about the late nights? My throat just constricted. This was my opportunity to discuss the message or the frightening phone call. But my courage wavered. Instead, I shake my head. I just want to make sure we're okay, Elena. Her shoulders slumped. James, I promise. We're good. I apologize if you feel neglected. She extended for my hand, her palm warm against mine. Things will settle down after the wedding. We'll be able to resume our lives after the major project at work. I wanted to trust it, but the whirling uncertainty refused to subside. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Kenna again? I disregarded it for now, focusing on Elena's eyes. Dark and imploring. Okay, I mumbled. I just get terrified on certain days. I feel like I don't know everything I should. She bit her lip. Is this about Damien again? Because if that is the case, I will be unable to continue reassuring you. He's out of the picture. I exhaled. No, it's not only that. My stomach twisted. I'd like to trust you. However, you are not always reachable. Sometimes you vanish and return home smelling like men's cologne. Jesus. Are we still on that? She snatched her hand away, her displeasure showing. I told you it was a coworker's jacket, or something. Why won't you accept my word? I grimaced. I'm trying, but try to view it from my perspective. My fiancé is absent half of the time, contacts me infrequently, and does not show up for wedding appointments. She squeezed her lips together. The bartender passed by, looking at us as if he could prevent a meltdown if we started shouting. But we did not. Elena sipped her wine and took a hesitant breath. James, if I have to defend myself every time, I'm not with you. This marriage will fail before it starts. Her voice trembled near tears or wrath. Or perhaps both. I'm not cheating. I am not lying. I'm just dealing with a million things. I shouldn't need an excuse to breathe. I glanced at her, guilty and suspicious. She sounded disgusted with me, as if my doubt was an assault on her dignity. Yet, in the back of my mind, that type letter lingered. She isn't who you think. A phone call. Stop digging. My hair had pickled. Could you be the victim of a scam, or the mastermind? I found myself choking and my voice weakened. I apologize. She softened somewhat, tears glistening in her eyes. I never intended to hurt you. It hurts to always mistrust me. My chest tightened. Okay. I mumbled, unsure what I was committing to. Another chance, another hush on my inner instincts. We finished our beverages silently. She faked a half smile, as if to suggest, we'll get past this. I forced one back, as if to say, yes, but a chasm still existed between us. She had to go early, As usual. Another work item. She insisted on paying for her wine before slipping out and telling me to text her if I wanted to come over. But she knew I had a busy day at the museum tomorrow. Some exhibits were set up. I watched her leave, my mind reeling with the bitterness of half-truths. Kenneth's text blinked on my phone. I strolled outside into the crisp night air. Read it beneath a streetlight. James. Weird question. Do you know anyone called Elena Anders? She appears in some old financial documents related to Redwood's client, which could be a coincidence. But I wanted to ask. My blood froze. Anders. Elena's last name was Strauss. Unless Anders was an alias or a previous name. Can I mean that? Could it be a mere coincidence? My pulse pounded. She isn't who you think. The notes. Words rang in my head. Could Elena's father be Anders in some versions? No. Her father was undoubtedly Strauss. I typed with shaky hands. Where did you see the name? Are you sure about the spelling? Kenna responded. Yes. Elena E. Anders. Redwood's cross-checking properties may be inconsequential, but they caught my attention. Not a big deal. I am just wondering. My chest contracted. Anders. Could Elena have had another surname in the past? If so, why is it hidden from me? Was it someone else named Elena? The timing was really suspect. Stop probing into the phone call. My head hammered. Perhaps I had stumbled across more than an affair. Perhaps she was involved in unscrupulous dealings. After all, she was a financial professional. I felt nauseated without thinking. I called Elena's phone. She answered the second ring, her voice tight. Hey, James. I croaked. Random question. Do you have a maiden name or something I'm not aware of? She paused. No. Why are you asking? I forced a half laugh. Elena contained several ancient document references. Anders wondered whether that was you. Definitely not me. She spoke quickly, crisply. I've never heard of that name. Another Elena, I suppose. My heart pounded. All right. Just checking. We hung up. She sounded certain, but was she? My nerves sizzled like hot wires. If she was telling a lie, I had no idea how deep. If she was telling the truth, I was out of my mind. I found myself standing on the pavement with the city lights flickering overhead. A quiet sense of dread set in. Perhaps I was discovering more secrets than I could manage. I had scarcely slept by morning, and my eyes felt like gravel. Elena sent me a casual text this morning. Love you. But I couldn't muster an appropriate response. My mind was a cyclone of doubt. Anders. Unknown telephone calls. Threatening messages were typed. This was turning into a labyrinth. I might not be able to leave unscathed. At the museum, I was meant to help. Travis created a new presentation regarding colonial trade routes. Normally, I'd like messing with the relics and ensuring that everything was in order, but my head was far away. I spent part of the morning checking my phone for fresh texts from Kenna, or weird calls from blocked numbers. Nothing. Around noon, Travis nudged me near the display case. You're losing focus. Is everything okay? I forced a grin. Wedding stress? He shook his head, sympathetically. I assume that's not a joke. Do not worry. It will all come together. I nodded, looking for an information sign on 18th century maritime logs. The irony was not lost on me. I was better at charting historical marine data than identifying my own fiancé. Visitors to the museum wandered around, some taking in the partially completed show. I attempted to block out my internal chaos. For a few hours it worked. I then received an SMS from Kenna. That name appeared again in Redwood's archives. Elena Anders. Possibly connected to your fiancé's company. Please let me know if you need any other information. I almost dropped a stack of postcards sent to your fiancé's firm. My mind was hammered. There was something significant going on. Did Elena have a deal-making alias, or was Redwood mixing people up? Travis saw my anxiety. Dude, you look sick. Should I call anyone? I shake my head. No. I just got some pressing personal matters. I will be back. I virtually flew out of the museum, disregarding the partially built display in the corridor and typing furiously. Yes. Please email me all that you have. This is vital. Kana's response was swift. Understood. I'll try to acquire your information discreetly. Redwood protects client data, but I can summarize what I know. My heart pounded. I needed a calm place. I slipped into the staff lounge, which was vacant by midday, and sat at a table. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed. My phone alerted me to an incoming document, likely from Kenna. It was a screenshot of a Redwood summary referencing Anders, within a finance investing context, with some information deleted. The article stated that Project Helena Partnership's major contact, Anders Investments, amalgamated Fletcher and the company 3 years before. Conditional NDA. and probable confrontation with local company Strauss and Investments. Strauss makes investments. Elena works for a large financial firm called Strauss and Holt. My stomach constricted. So Anders is linked to a Strauss, which may not be a coincidence. And the date? Elena and I met about 3 years ago. My mind whirled. Could Elena have been using the identity Anders for some secret project? I typed Kenna. That is very suspicious. Strauss and Investing is essentially my fiance's company. She has been there 3 years. Kenna responded. I suspected as much. Redwood is looking into potential shell businesses and the possibility of forging asset transfers. Not sure how it relates to my aunt's case, but it appeared in the same database. Search for shell corporations that are forging assets. My throat became dry. Is this why Elena's father became so involved? Are they laundering anything? The puzzle pieces started to build a scary picture. Perhaps a typed note. She isn't who you think. Referred to her involvement in questionable money, not simply cheating. Or perhaps both. I typed back. Could you keep me updated? I won't tell Redwood where I received this information. Kenna agreed. My hands shook. I now understood the phone call instructing me to cease digging. If Redwood was looking into Elena or her father, they may have used an alias to move money around. That might land you in serious legal problems. That may also explain her father's desire for a prenup. Documents. He may seek to protect criminal assets. I put my face into my palms to relieve my anxiety. This was more than just a tangled love triangle. This was a potential bomb ready to detonate during my wedding. If Elena was knowingly complicit, her tears and regrets could be part of a larger lie. 2 p.m. I couldn't concentrate. I told Travis I was feeling bad and left the museum. I drove around the city, my heart beating as my phone beeped, Elena asking if I wanted dinner. I ignored it. I couldn't speak to her just now. I ended myself parking along the riverbank walkway, where I had previously attempted to clear my mind from the Cologne catastrophe. I peered at the murky water, the late afternoon sun reflecting off the ripples, and somewhat blinding me. This was too large. What should I do if she was involved in unlawful financial dealings? Make her feel vulnerable. Marry her and be quiet. My entire moral sense trembled. On impulse, I dialed the 212 number from a busy line. Beep, beep. No response. A generic voicemail. I left no message. I felt like a man searching for ghosts. Finally, I resolved to face Elena directly about Anders. If she had a valid explanation, I'd know if she lied again. If it came to that, I'd call the wedding off. That was enough. I texted her about 5 p.m. We need to talk. Face to face. Urgent, she replied swiftly. Sure. My position is at 7. I drove home and changed into something comfy. My palms shook as I contemplated the upcoming confrontation. How would she react if she were guilty? Anger. Denial. If she was innocent, perhaps she would prove it. 7:05 p.m. I knocked on her flat door. She opened it. Her features were painted with a concerned expression. You are pale, she remarked quietly, standing aside to allow me in. I smelled her customary vanilla-scented candle. I saw a neat living room with luxurious blankets. This area, which I'd been to so many times, felt heartbreakingly familiar. It now felt like the stage was set for a dramatic clash. We sat on the couch. Did she offer me tea or wine? I refused. My stomach churned. Elena. I began with a shaking voice. I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest. She blinked. Eyebrows. Knitting. Of course. You scare me. I brushed my palms against my jeans. Have you ever used a different name at work, like Anders? Her expression froze for a fraction of a second before becoming confused. What? No. Why are you asking? I noticed that brief pause. Because Redwood is looking into a possible shell corporation linked to Strawson. The contact's name is Elena Anders. It seems suspiciously similar to your name. My voice cracked. Look, if you're in difficulty, please let me know. She looked at me, lips parted. For a second, I thought tears would flow. Then her gaze tightened. Where did you receive the information? Redwood is an outside firm. Are you looking into my business? My heart sunk at her deflective tone. Please answer me. I said with a harsh voice. Are you Anders? Her cheeks reddened. I can't believe you would accuse me of criminal activities. What the hell, James? She leapt up from the couch. This is ridiculous. Shell corporations. Redwood. Did you hack my accounts or something? I got up and tried not to shout. No. I did not hack anything. I have a friend who is dealing with Redwood on a separate subject. This name came up. I recognized your firm. The time frame. It's too much to be a mere coincidence. She scowled at me, fists clasped. You're becoming increasingly paranoid. First, you believe I am cheating. So you think I'm laundering money? Are you listening to yourself? My throat stung. Yes, I am. I don't want to believe it, but everything points to you concealing something significant. Your father's bizarre participation. You're fading. The telephone calls. I threw my hands up. Someone intimidated me, urging me to stop digging. That is not natural, Elena. She placed a hand on her forehead. James was threatened. That is why you didn't tell me. Because I wasn't convinced you were behind it. I snapped, and quickly regretted the rudeness. Her face contorted with pain. That shows how little you trust me. She let out a nervous breath. Eyes are gleaming. I have never used the name Anders. I have no idea who that is. I'm not a member of any shell corporation. My father is pushing for a prenup since he is controlling. But it's not about illegal transactions. He only wants to protect family assets. That is it. Her voice crackled. How can you believe I am a criminal? My heart pounded. She sounded real, despite the micro pause previously. So, why did the numerous references to you as Anders Redwood indicate it? Is it possible that your father or someone else is fabricating your identity? She blinked. She shook her head, as if the idea hadn't occurred to her. If Redwood says such, it can be a misunderstanding or someone mimicking me. That can happen in high finance. People engage in identity theft in order to disclose information. She halted and looked at me. But I swear I am not involved. Why aren't you giving me the benefit of the doubt? The strain in my shoulders pulsed. This confrontation was causing me headaches. Give the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying, Elena, but each time I do, something new emerges. That screams. You are lying. My voice softened. If you know anything about Anders, please inform me right now. I can handle it. She stared at me. Her eyes were full with emotion. She then grabbed up her phone and tapped something. I am calling my father. Perhaps he knows. We maintain certain earlier records for large transactions. This could be an internal code name. I do not know. I swallowed. She placed the call on speaker. It rang. Her father's gruff voice responded. Elena, is everything okay? Yes, Dad, she said, looking at me. I have a question. Did we or Strauss ever use the name Elena Anders in any deals or code projects? Silence. A cough, followed by a slightly forced laugh. What type of question is that? Please answer me. Elena persisted. He cleared his throat. Not that I am aware of. Why? She shot me a sharp glance. Someone claims Redwood found references to Elena Anders. We want to make sure that no one uses my name for anything suspicious. His tone became cautious. Redwood, you say? I haven't heard about it. Possible administrative error. I'll check with my internal team, but I doubt it's legitimate. Do you worry, dear? Elena's gaze lingered on me briefly. Please let me know if you find anything. She ended the call. Exhaling. See? He has no idea. I wanted to believe it, but something about his reply felt odd, as if he was concealing. Her father's words seemed slightly hesitant. Remember her micro pause. Unless I was projecting. Elena turned to face me. Arms folded. Satisfied. The first wiped my face as fatigue overcame me. I do not know. Maybe. She took a step closer, her voice shaking with fury and hurt. I'm finished being interrogated. Do you have any proof that I am lying? No. It's just gossip, phone calls, and your own suspicions. If you can't trust me, let's cancel this wedding. My stomach lurched. Do not mention that. She flung her hands up. So quit accusing me. My father said he'd check. Redwood might be mixing up names or referring to another Elena. We're in a large metropolis, James. People exchange names all the time. She glared. But if you can't get over it, how can we move on? We stood in a tight quiet. My head was filled with contradictory impulses. I had no concrete evidence. Just a jumble of puzzle pieces. Maybe she was correct. That Redwood highlighted another Elena. The note in the phone call may be from someone teasing me. Perhaps I was being expertly gaslit. Finally, I exhaled. I do not want to call off the wedding. I want the truth. She bit her lip. Tears flowed. That's the truth. I am not Anders. I'm not cheating. I am not laundering money. I adore you and want to marry you. Her voice cracked. But you need to give me a chance, James. My chest hurts. She sounded quite desperate. Okay, I muttered as I stepped forward and embraced her in my arms. Her shoulders shook. Perhaps we were both simply stressed to the point of breaking. Perhaps I was chasing shadows. I felt like a terrible person. I was half positive she was lying. I was halfway positive I was paranoid. She clutched to me and sobbed gently. She finally pulled away. Her eyes were crimson. Can we put this behind us? I need you. We've got a life to construct. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah. Let us try. The rest of the evening was quiet, terribly tender. We ate takeout on her couch. We talked quietly about the wedding guest list. Music playlist. She brightened slightly when I agreed to finalize the band deposit. I tried myself to appear cool, but my mind was still racing with unsettling questions. By midnight, I had fallen asleep with her in my arms, the lovely smell of her hair combined with the bitterness of my doubts. I awoke in Elena's bed, bewildered. For a little moment, I forgot about the swirling turmoil. Then it slammed back, followed by a dull aching in my head. She had gone, perhaps to work on the nightstand. A note has to be run. Thank you for entrusting me. Let's have dinner tonight. I love you with my heart twisted. Perhaps we can salvage this. Maybe. I collected my belongings and drove to my apartment to have a shower and change clothes. My phone beeped. Kenna sent another text. Hey, Redwood uncovered more about Anders. What about a fiancé? Not sure if it's relevant. I can't get into details just yet. A fiancé. I tightened my grasp on the steering wheel. Another fiancé, Anders. Or was that referring to Elena as someone's fiancé under that name? The possibilities made my stomach turn. I typed back. Keep me posted. This is huge. I will be discreet. She offered a fast thumbs up. The anxiety crept back in. If Redwood discovered allusions to a fiancé, it could indicate a larger hidden identity or relationship. It could also be a problem in Redwood's database. I had no idea. My mind whirled. At home, I showered and tried to gather myself. Elena had insisted she was not Anders. Her father pretended ignorance, but Redwood had discovered something. Where was the mismatch? Unless Redwood was the one at fault at 11 a.m., I chose to immerse myself in the Kennedy forgeries case. Seeking for peace. I laid the diaries out on the living room table. My phone buzzed again. Not Kenna this time. A blocked number. Tension surged through me. The last blocked call threatened me. I steeled myself and answered. Hello? A quiet voice spoke. Harrington, are you finished meddling? Or do I need to spell it out for you? My blood became chilly. Same voice. Who in the heck are you? I hissed a dry chuckle. You are not allowed to ask questions. Keep your nose away from Redwood's leads. Stop chasing Anders, or you'll regret it. My pulse pounded. Is someone threatening me again? Why? Because I discovered some dodgy business concerning Elena. Do you work for her father? Silence. Then a snort. I said, keep your nose out. No more warnings. The call went dead. I cursed the toxic combination of wrath and dread. This was real. Someone related to Elena's fear, Anders, Redwood, or all three wanted me to remain silent. If Elena was truly ignorant, she could also be in risk. If she was complicit, she may be behind these calls. My stomach lurched. I needed to inform somebody. The police. That would not get you very far without proof. My phone alerted me to a text message from an unfamiliar local number. Meet me at Vale Park at 1 p.m. Important. I tapped to see if there were any names. Nothing. Just the message. My pulse raced. Another participant in this twisted game. This could be a trap. Alternatively, it may be a whistleblower with answers. I typed. Who is this? The reply. Someone who can assist you understand. Elena. 1 p.m. Do not be late. I shuddered. The world had taken on a weird air, as if I had walked into a spy thriller. But my gut urged me to leave. I had to. For once, I'd gather solid intelligence rather than gossip. I clutched my jacket as my heart raced. 12:50 p.m. Vale Park was a medium-sized stretch of grass and oaks, with a few benches and a duck pond. It was normally a calm location for parents to wander with their children. I arrived, looking for strange individuals. The early afternoon sun shone brightly, and the air was fresh. A few dog walkers wandered about, as did a jogger or two and an elderly lady feeding birds. There are no evident signs of a cloak and dagger scenario. I sat on a bench beneath a maple tree. Eyes darted. My phone read 12:57. Anxiety surged. Perhaps no one would show. Or maybe they'd bring a gun. The minutes passed by. Then, at 101 a person in a gray hoodie came, his face partially hidden by sunglasses. My pulse raced. He stopped a few steps away and spoke quietly. James. The first nodded cautiously. He looked around before sitting next to me, leaving a gap. I obtained your number from the Redwoods League. I understand you're checking into Elena's background. I swallowed. Yes, and you are. He removed his sunglasses, revealing a haggard visage, with black rings under his eyes. Late 30s, maybe. Call me Brandon. I was engaged to someone who went by the name Elena Anders. My chest contracted like a vise. What? I rasped. He nodded grudgingly. 3 years ago, she vanished after we became serious. She once stated that she needed to deal with a financial emergency. Next thing I know, her phone is disconnected. She withdrew her portion of an account we owned. A hefty sum left me confused. I just stared. The heart is thudding. Are you telling me that it was the same person? My fiancé. Brandon exhaled. Eyes are bleak. I spotted her photo in the redwoods. Partial files. It's absolutely her. My lungs seized, and the edges of my vision blurred. She introduced herself as Elena Strauss. No mention of Anders. We've been together for 2 years. He made a bitter chuckle. I was with her for nearly 10 months, however. We got engaged halfway through. She was charming and intense. We promised to build a life. Then she disappeared. He paused. I spent months trying to find her. We discovered hints of many aliases, but nothing definite. Redwood searches revealed the Anders name. And I discovered your name linked to her, presumably as her fiancé. So I reached out. My mouth was sand. She claims to have no knowledge of Anders. She denies everything. Brandon spat at the side. Then she lies. Perhaps she has a pattern. Getting engaged, holding on to finances, and pulling out. Or perhaps she is in deeper trouble. He massaged his temples. Look, if you adore her, be careful. She stole my money and tampered with other people's assets. Then she disappeared. Redwood is looking into a string of fraudulent transactions involving the Anders identity. My world tipped. She might be a con artist. That is absurd. She introduced me to her father. She has a secure job. Brandon shakes his head. Could be part of a larger effort. Her father could be genuine or complicit. Or she has several father figures. I know this seems crazy, but I knew her face. I'm certain it's her. My breath came in jagged gasps. Elena laughed sweetly as memories passed before her. When I questioned about Anders, she panicked, and the phone calls told me to stop probing. God, I whispered. If this is real, I've been living a fiction. He placed his hand on my shoulder. A comrade in heartbreak. I understand how that feels. I was crazy about her. She then stopped communicating with me. They left me with bills. Redwood requested me to testify on the money trail. My head sunk into my hands, tears welling up in my eyes. I can't believe it. We sat there in wretched silence. Brandon rose after a brief moment. I have to go. However, this is a caution. If she's still tricking you, beware. She might disappear once she's obtained what she needs. I looked up to him, my voice wavering. The wedding is in a few weeks. Everyone is invited. She acted genuine. A melancholy smile curled his lips. She was also genuine in her interactions with me. I am sorry, Guy. Redwood will confirm this soon enough. I just wanted to let you know. Perhaps you can defend yourself. I looked at him, speechless. He adjusted his sunglasses, stuffed his hands into his hoodie pockets, and went across the park's lawn. My thoughts spun in dread. This can't be real. She would not do that. She introduced me to her dad. Unless the father was an accomplice. Or a con man. Or perhaps Brandon was lying. But Redwood's data, the sham firms, and the 212 phone calls all converged. I sat there, feeling physically nauseous. The woman I was going to marry might have a completely different identity. Perhaps you tried the same scam on another man. Stop digging. That's what they told me. Because if I dug, I would discover this. Eventually, I stumbled to my car, locked the doors, and sat trembling behind the wheel. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena, ironically. I miss you. Let's spend a lovely night in. I will bring dessert. 3 inches. Bile rose in my throat. A cozy night in. While she was possibly planning the greatest betrayal of my life. Tears of wrath and despair threatened to flow. Yes, I typed back. My hands shook. I needed to see her again. But now, equipped with ruthless knowledge, Brandon's comments resonated. She might disappear once she's obtained what she needs. Was that a wedding day, or something else? I started the engine, which sent my mind spinning. If she was a con artist, it might be best to contact the police or Redwood. But I was curious to see how she would react when confronted with Brandon's narrative. My heart pounded with a toxic combination of sorrow and rage. I sat at home in a stupor all afternoon. I paced, glanced at the walls, and attempted to control my quivering hands. Elena texted a couple more times. Things are casual. My responses were short. She eventually stated that she would arrive around 7. She wanted to bring wine. Talk about the final wedding invitation. A perfect opportunity for me to confront her with Brandon's revelations. 6:50 p.m. I sat in my living room, fists clenched and immovable, reading the carefully organized wedding invites on the coffee table. They were so innocent, and so official. It's as if none of this crazy exists. 7:05 p.m. A quiet knock on the door. My heart jolted. I opened it. Elena stood there, smiling, holding a paper bag that appeared to contain dessert and a bottle of red wine. Hey, sorry I'm late, she remarked, walking in. Traffic. There's always traffic. I mustered a stiff smile. That's okay. She placed the bag and bottle on the kitchen countertop. He turned to me. Eyebrows elevated. Is everything okay? You appear intense. I swallowed, feeling the pulse in my throat. We need to talk. Her brow furrowed again. She slipped out of her jacket. James, I thought we had cleared the air. Is it about Anders again? I nodded slowly. Yes, and more. My mouth felt sandy. I motioned to the couch. She looked at me warily before settling down on the cushions. I stayed standing, arms crossed. She exhaled. All right, let us do this. What happens now? I controlled my voice. I met someone who claimed to have been your fiancé 3 years ago. Brandon suggested that you use the name Elena Anders. Her eyes expanded. A flash of panic crossed her face. Then she sputtered. That is ludicrous. You're meeting random folks who claim I was their fiancé. James, do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? My fists clenched. He recognized your photo through the redwood. He claimed you vanished with his money. He ended up in debt. He believes you operate financial frauds. The redwood is closing in. Is this true? She stood abruptly, her expression hardening. This is ridiculous. I cannot believe you would believe a stranger's story. Did you ever consider that he might be a fraudster attempting to defraud you? Anger flared. He had information, Elena. He described your mannerisms and smile. The timeline corresponds. Redwoods. The documents match. Explain that. She brushed by me and paced the living room. I don't need to explain how certain psychos lie. Here it is. Oh, God. She pushed her hands to her forehead, her voice wavering on the verge of tears. I can't continue dealing with these charges. I turned to face her. A wave of sadness is cresting. Then explain why Redwood has your photo under Anders. Why? This man recognizes you. Show me something that proves him wrong. Because I can no longer ignore the signs. She glared with watery eyes. I do not have a magical piece of evidence, James, because I never did that. He is lying. Redwood could have a photo of me. Or perhaps it was adjusted. People do insane stuff. My voice cracked. Elena, I want to believe you. But don't you see how everything connects? The phone calls warned me to stop your father's dirty activities. This is the ex-fiancé. She marched to the table and slapped her hand on the wedding invitations. So what about us? Our recollections. We've lived, traveled, and met each other's families. Does that imply nothing? If I were a con artist, wouldn't I have run away already? Tears welled in my eyes. Perhaps the wedding payoff is higher. Perhaps you're waiting for the goodies. Or the shared bank accounts. Or, who knows? My nasty tone made me cringe within. I never imagined I'd utter those things to her. But, here we were. She let out a ragged sob. Do you think so little of me? She sank onto a dining chair. Tears flowed. I swear on my life, James. The first and not this Anders woman. I've never defrauded anyone. If Redwood has me listed, it's either a mistake or sabotage. The genuine emotion in her eyes tugged at my heartstrings. Could she really be an innocent victim of identity theft? Could Brandon have been duped by a lady who simply looked like Elena? My mind swirled with the possibilities, but the phone calls threatening me, the father, had a dubious tone. Everything seemed more than a coincidence. Silence extended. My chest felt as though an iron band was squeezing it. She sobbed quietly. I hovered near the table, hesitant. Then my phone vibrated on the kitchen countertop. I took a check at it. Kenna sent an SMS. Urgent update. Redwood. Anders' photo ID has been verified. 100% identical to your fiancé's photograph. Stay safe. My breath caught. Elena noticed the phone lighting up. Who is it? She whispered. Tears glisten. As I read the text, my throat constricts. A perfect match. My stomach turned violently. She saw my panicked expression in her eyes. What does it say? I closed my eyes. Dread is overwhelming me. They matched your photo with Anders Redwood. Certain. She rose up again, tears turning to anger. They're not sure whether they're lying or forging data. Redwood dislikes my father. Perhaps it's corporate sabotage. My father informed me that Redwood has been trying to sabotage Strauss and Holt. This is their tactic, James. The first glared at her. How far will you take this? Everyone is inventing evidence lines. Redwood has no personal vengeance against me. Brandon had no motive to appear out of nowhere. Her lips quivered. I do not know. She brushed away tears. I am telling the truth. They must have a purpose, or someone has set me up. My heart pounded. The heartbreak was awful. If she had been lying, she was terrible. If she was telling the truth, she was the victim. I had no way of confirming. Ken. Kenneth. The message was driven into my psyche. A perfect match. Redwood would not take it lightly. She sensed my hesitation, her face contorted with anguish. She grabbed my hand. Please, James, do not allow Redwood or an angry ex derail us. If you need me to sign a document disclaiming any connection, I will. If you want me to go directly to Redwood, I will do so. I looked into her tear-streaked face. She appeared genuine, shivering with raw dread. My determination weakened. Would you go to Redwood and have them interrogate you? Allow them to authenticate your identification. She gulped hard. If it means saving us. Yes, I will do anything. For a brief moment, hope ignited. Perhaps Redwood would see it was a different woman. Perhaps Brandon held a perverse grudge. But, as Tex mentioned, Ken verified his photo ID. That is not a trivial confusion. My mind was a whirlpool. Then do it. I spoke in a hollow voice. Go to Redwood tomorrow. Clear your name. I'll accompany you if you wish. If they are falsifying data, it should be clear. She paused, a flash of concern crossing her face, and then nodded slowly. Fine. Let me set things up. Alternatively, you can set it up. That way, they can't claim I manipulated anything. I nearly fainted with relief, yet fear continued to bite. All right. I will contact someone from Redwood and see if we can arrange a meeting. My voice quivered. If you come out clean, I will dismiss all suspicions. We can go forward. She hugged me tightly. Yes, please. I simply want us to be happy. She sobbed on my shoulder. The stress in her body was enormous. I stroked her hair, unsure whether I was soothing a victim or a master manipulator whose plan was collapsing. We remained like this for a long time. By the time she calmed down, her tears had soaked my shirt. She looked up. The swollen eyes forced a tiny grin. Thank you for allowing me to prove myself. I nodded weakly. If the Redwoods lie down, they will be exposed. She sniffed. Yes. She then uttered a weak laugh. I assume the desert is colder now. I looked at the paper bag on the counter. The entire day felt like a bizarre mess that overshadowed any typical routines. It's okay, I muttered. I have lost my appetite. She nodded. I agree. Another wave of tears approached, so she inhaled to calm herself. I should probably leave. Let yourself relax. I'll text you about Redwood tomorrow, or you can contact us first. I moved back, arms at my sides. Okay. We separated softly. No romantic farewell. She put on her jacket, eyes red but resolute. I opened the door. She hesitated at the entrance and looked back. Thank you, James, for trusting me. Even if it's only a little. I gave a weary nod. She departed. I closed the door. I locked it. Then I slid to the floor, back against the wall. My mind is spinning. This was the plan. Schedule a Redwood meeting. If Elena sincerely wanted to clear her name, that's excellent. If she stalled or attempted to sabotage it, that would be sufficient evidence. My phone sounded again. Is everything okay? Redwood confirms that Anders' fiancé is your fiancé. I'm worried about you. I typed back. We might run an official ID check tomorrow. She insists that Redwood is framing her. I don't know, I kind of replied. Be careful. Redwood rarely makes identification mistakes. Please let me know if you require backup. I stared at her words, terror filling my throat. Redwood rarely makes ID mistakes, thus if Elena went to him, the game would be finished. If she was actually Anders. Unless she attempted to manipulate Redwood or fled. The possibilities made my head hurt. Time dragged. I got a few hours of uneasy sleep, interspersed by nightmares of a wedding that ended with me alone at the altar. Or pursuing Elena, along interminable halls. Next morning at 9 a.m. She hasn't texted me yet. I phoned Redwood's general line and requested an appointment to clarify an identification confusion. The receptionist stated they will get back to me. If Redwood booked a meeting with Elena, my heart would pound. Show or disappear? That was the question. I texted Elena and called Redwood, expecting to hear about the appointment time. Let us do this. Minutes went by. Finally, she responded. Okay, perfect. I'll be meeting Dad for lunch. Please let me know the time. We will manage it jointly. 3 inches. I looked at her love emoji, feeling nauseated. Could she really be so affectionate if she was cornered? Or was that all part of the con? My phone beeped again. Redwood's receptionist. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., we can meet with an ID specialist. Does it work? I wrote yes, thank you, and texted Elena. The details. She just said, I'll be there. So it's a final showdown. Either Redwood was mistaken, or Elena lied. By tomorrow at 2 p.m., my entire future might be ruined. I paced my apartment, ignoring Travis's calls regarding the museum. I was a wreck. I ended up calling Kenna and asked whether Redwood was ready for the potential that Elena would be argumentative or last minute. Cancel. Kenna informed me that Redwood's ID measures were thorough, ranging from official documents to facial recognition. If Elena were Anders, no amount of denial would suffice. That night, I hardly slept. Elena did not come over. She said she was preparing for Redwood. My imagination brought up visions of her creating fresh IDs or screaming in real agony. I had no idea which version was real. The day of reckoning 1:30 p.m. I arrived outside Redwood's downtown headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper. The foyer smelled of corporate polished marble floors and modern art security workstations. My heart pounded so loudly that I was concerned the guard would hear. I texted Elena to check if she had arrived. No response. 1:45 p.m., no sign of her. Anxiety escalated. My cell phone vibrated. Kenna, wish me luck. She said she couldn't be there but was giving moral support. So sweet, yet so overshadowed by my anxiety. 1:55 p.m. I strolled the lobby, ignoring the receptionist's questioning gaze. She isn't arriving. I thought bleakly. My chest ached as she ran. The rotating door spun, and Elena walked in, dressed in a fitted blazer and pencil skirt. Looking pale but resolute. Our eyes met. I half expected her to bolt. She did not. She walked over and gave me a hesitant nod. Let us end this once and for all. I breathed, relief and terror merging. Yeah. We ascended the elevator to the 24th floor of Redwood's offices. A friendly but stern secretary directed us to a conference room. The walls were glass, and the furniture was elegant. My stomach turned when a suited woman entered, holding a tablet. She presented herself as Miss Porter, Redwood's identification and compliance specialist. We sat at a gleaming table. Miss Porter's countenance was neutral, but her eyes flickered to Elena in recognition. She didn't spend any time. Thank you for attending. We have grounds to suspect Miss Elena Strauss is the same person as Miss Elena Anders. We would like to confirm or deny that, using proper identification checks and documented evidence. Elena's voice quivered slightly. I am not Anders. Let's do it. Miss Porter nodded and tapped her iPad. We have a photograph from 3 years ago that we believe is of you, Miss Strauss, as well as certain biometric data. She rotated the tablet, revealing a zoomed-in face photo of Elena, a near twin. The hair was somewhat different, but the face was easily identifiable. My stomach sank. Elena looked at it. Her lips parted. She shook her head forcefully. That looks like me. But that's not me. Porter's lips thinned. We also have an archival driver's license with the name Anders and a corresponding photo. We'd need you to bring your own driver's license for a side-by-side comparison and sign a paper agreeing to a fingerprint check. Elena hesitated, her gaze flickering to mine. I held my breath. If she refuses that ID, so be it. She inhaled, rummaged through her purse, took out her license, and slid it across. Do what you must. My conscience is clear. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Miss Porter emerged briefly, presumably to check Elena's ID. Elena turned to me, her cheeks heated. See? I am complying. I nodded, shakily. I don't know what to say. Miss Porter reappeared and carefully placed Elena's license on the table, along with a form for fingerprint consent. Elena signed with shaky fingers. Miss Porter nodded and tapped the desk intercom. A lab technician entered. They had a small, electronic fingerprint scanner. Elena put her fingers on it one by one. There were silent tears in her eyes. Miss Porter sat with us after the technician had left. The tension in the room was so thick that I could choke on it. 15 long minutes later, the technician reappeared, whispering something to Miss Porter. She grimaced, typed on her tablet, and stared at Elena. Miss Strauss, I'd want to speak to you quietly for a moment. Elena's face wrinkled. No, James can stay. We have no secrets. Miss Porter inhaled. All right. Her gaze shifted to me, Mr. Harrington. The fingerprint analysis and pictures both show a match with Miss Anders. Biometric points. Miss Strauss, you are indeed the same person. My heart broke. I heard a roar in my ears. Elena trembled. No, she rasped. That is not possible. You must have rigged it. This is me. Miss Porter's tone softened slightly. We have no reason to manipulate anything. Redwood's system is consistent. Unless you have another explanation, we are prepared to pursue legal action. Elena's face became ashen. She stuttered. I can't discuss this. Then she glanced at me, her eyes wide with dread. James. I apologize. I did not want it to be like this. A cold came over me. You lied. I spoke with a hollow voice the entire time. Her shoulders shook. She opened her mouth, but Miss Porter stepped in. Miss Anders Redwood has records of your financial transactions, including a failed engagement to Brandon Hill. We've also detected messages that indicate continuous attempts to scam fresh targets. She halted and looked at me. We believe Mr. Harrington may be one of these targets. Elena sobbed. She attempted to stand, but her knees appeared to buckle. I leaped up reflexively and grabbed her arm. Her convulsions shot a stab of sadness through me. She was the lady I adored, but she was also a liar whom I barely knew. She whispered to James, "I never meant to hurt you. My father, forced me do it. We had no choice." Miss Porter motioned to a colleague who stepped in expression. Stern. "We can go over the details in a private legal session, Miss Anders. Redwood is ready to file charges. You can cooperate or we can escalate," Elena cried. She turned to me, her voice cracking. "James, I love you." That bit was real. I wanted to stop, but my father was insistent. "We keep going. What was the money for?" I backed away. My world is swirling. She was Anders, Brandon's fiancée. A conman, possibly a parent, was an accomplice. The wedding was part of the fraud. Miss Porter spoke something about upcoming charges, but my ears hummed. I felt Elena's anxious eyes on me, but I couldn't even look at her. The woman I had planned to marry was a phony. She clutched for my arm, sobbing. "I apologize. I love you. Please do not let them take me." I tore away, choked with anguish and wrath. "Do not touch me." My voice came out rough and choked. Miss Porter nodded at her colleague. "We will accompany Miss Anders to a private room until the authorities arrive." Elena cried, her face a mess of tears. "James, please believe me. I had no intention of going through with the hoax. I wanted to be with you." I turned my back. My eyes were stinging with hot tears. Her pleas were like knives twisting in my chest. Redwood staffed softly but forcibly led her out of the conference room. Her tears echoed across the hall. I sank into a chair, my face buried in my hands and shaking uncontrollably. It was over. Every suspicion was confirmed in the worst way she could utilize me. The vow was never real. She wore a mask the entire time. The heartbreak was overwhelming. "Redwoods." Miss Porter approached with a compassionate expression. But I was beyond consoling. When the cops arrived, I made a quick statement. Redwood assured me that they had sufficient evidence to make a solid case. They suggested I consult an attorney in case she had opened accounts in my name. My thoughts became numb. I exited the building in a daze. My cheeks are burned from tears. The city bustle felt unreal, as if I were floating outside of my body. I recall how we used to laugh at couples who broke up for trivial reasons. How she told me about her enormous dreams. How she insisted on silver ribbons for her wedding. All illusions. My phone vibrated with a message from Kenna. "I heard Redwood corroborate this. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" I typed. "No, thank you for everything." Then I slumped into the driver's seat. Eyes moist, throat roaring. The wedding invitations are on my coffee table at home. The half-planned honeymoon. The dream of eternity. It's all ashes. She was being investigated for fraud. Her father is possibly complicit. The fiasco was far from ended, legally. But for me, the emotional impact had already occurred. I envisioned tomorrow's headlines. The society wedding has been canceled. Bride was arrested for financial fraud. My father, relatives, and guests. My life was upended. A part of me also wanted to vanish. But there was no downside for me. Just heartbreak. One last SMS came from an unknown number. "I told you to stop digging. Now you can see the repercussions." I stared at it, hollow. They were correct, albeit in an unusual way. I discovered the truth, and it shattered everything. But maybe knowing was better than living a falsehood. Because of the vow. "Until death do us part" should have actual meaning. And she offered me a fatal betrayal. I started the engine, tears still stinging, and drove away into the evening. Alone but finally free of delusions. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what